Good evening, everyone. It's 6 o'clock, and I'd like to call the Rules Committee of June 21st, 2021 to order. We have a quorum. Would someone make the motion with respect to suspension of the rules?
I move that we suspend the rules to allow for remote participation.
Yes, thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
All right.
Recording in progress.
Would you call the roll? To suspend the rules.
Okay. Councilmember Kelly?
Here.
Councilmember Braithwaite? Here. Councilmember Nguyen?
Aye.
Councilmember Nusma?
Here.
Councilmember Burns?
Aye.
Councilmember Suffredin?
Here.
Councilmember Ravel?
Here.
Councilmember Reed?
Here.
Councilmember Fleming? Mayor Biss?
Aye.
All right. Thank you all. Our next item is public comment. Do we have someone signed up for public comment?
We have two people signed up for a public comment online, and I think there's one in person. Sir, do you want to step up?
Welcome, Mr. Friedman.
Good evening, Rules Committee. Hope everyone had a great weekend and enjoyed Father's Day. I enjoyed driving the convertible.
Excuse me, Mr. Friedman, could you move your mic just a little closer to you? I'm also not certain it's on. It's not on?
Is it on? Can you hear me?
Are we all not on?
Can you hear me?
Okay, thank you.
I need a handout.
Yes.
Oh,
Now
I can
you're-
hear myself
you're
now.
live, okay.
Okay. Good evening, Rules Committee. Hope everyone had a great weekend and enjoyed Father's Day. I enjoyed driving the convertible in the Juneteenth parade. Saw a lot of old friends and some new ones. It was a great celebration. Thank you. A week ago at City Council meeting, I passed out to everyone a proposal for public participation ordinance. I'm asking for your feedback if this is something that we can use as written or revised to fit our specific needs here in Evanston. I know we've been talking about public comment for a long time, and the purpose and intent is to create a dialogue. Thank you for Mayor Biss and all council members who are promoting transparency and accountability and asking for the public's input on many issues. There are many questions and concerns that are raised at council meetings by residents and never addressed. This is a huge issue. So residents need to know what format we'll be using to include resident input and at the same time receive feedback to address residents' questions and concerns. It sounds like public participation and discussion is a priority for our new mayor and council members. I believe that this public participation ordinance would be a great first step, and looking forward to all of your feedback. Thank you, Ray Friedman, 2nd Ward.
Thank you very much. Next, we have Mary Rosinski, who I believe is on the line. Mary, are you with us?
Chair Wen, she's just joined the meeting right now.
All right, thank you. Okay, thanks. Welcome, Ms. Rosinski.
Oh, hi, sorry. I just wanted to make comment that this meeting was not posted properly. It was hard to find it because last night I went online and it didn't have any meetings listed for today for rules. And then someone else told me there is a rules meeting. And then I went up today and looked at it, and it had been changed to there where you could actually see that there was an agenda, but then I couldn't get through. So it was a little complicated. But the reason I was calling was I was wondering two things. Is under the staff recommends on our agendas, under our rules, I'm wondering if there's a way we can get that a council member's owns or is the initiator behind a staff recommendation so that we don't waste staff time on things that no council members are taking. I think I'm on here twice, I don't know. Oh, sorry. So, for example, the Northwestern, that came out as a staff recommendation in spite of so much against our municipal code. And yet our alderman, I don't think, was aware of it. She was out of town. And no one in the community of the residents were aware of it or had been consulted. So I think in good practice, when we are doing a staff recommendation, it would be nice to know that we're not going to waste both the alderman, staff, or resident time on something that maybe no one supports. That was one thing. The other thing I wanted to say was that on the committee meetings, I know we've limited time to 2 minutes. Years ago, there used to be a little bit more time where the committee meetings were much more friendly and a little give and take so the residents could exchange ideas with the council and with the staff on those meetings to answer questions. So I hope we can get back to that being a form of communication with our city from our residents. Thank you so much. I believe that's all I really wanted to say.
Thank you very much. That concludes our public comment. So now we're moving on to items for consideration. R1 is discussion of the rules and organization of the City of Evanston. And I am opening the floor. Well, I'll take it back for a moment. So as everyone remembers, and for the public's knowledge, 2 weeks ago, we met as a Rules Committee, and our agenda was very full. So we decided to come back tonight to work on the next portion of the rules that have been proposed, the changes that have been proposed. And then we will have a Rules Committee on July 7th to what we hope is complete all of the changes that have been, to discuss all of the, and complete all of the changes that have been proposed. So for tonight, we are discussing, as I said, the City Council rules and organization revisions. And we have those in our packet in a redlined draft. And I am opening the floor for anyone to discuss them. I believe we got to, someone will correct me, I believe section 9. And so, yes, so the next item, I'll just raise it. The next item that we have to discuss is, if we all can follow to page 14. We have a light? Okay. Page 14 of our packet, which is discusses 9.2, which discusses adding a standing committee called the References Committee. So that is where we are now to discuss that item. Councilmember Reed and then Councilmember Rebel.
Thank you. I just, as a place note, I don't believe that did we adopt the changes that were proposed at the last meeting, and those don't seem reflected still as an edit in this document.
Mr. Cummings?
Corporation Counsel Nicholas Cummings, members of the Rules Committee, Chair Nguyen. So my understanding, at least the direction that I took from the last meeting, was that anything that we had discussed up until that point was to be accepted in the document, which is what I did. Starting on page, I believe it is 93 of your packet, is the original red line from the last meeting on June 7th, if you would like to refer to those. But all the way up until, at least that was the direction I took, and if I misunderstood, I apologize. But the previous red lines are in the packet, as well as the updated version that we've been working on.
So the first item, the first set of rules that is also redlined, that incorporates all of the changes that we made at the June 2 weeks ago meeting.
Correct.
June 7th meeting. Okay. And so we can see the original redline draft that we were working on that night, which is then in the packet as well.
Yes, starting at page 93 in the packet.
Okay. Is that clear?
Yeah,
Councilmember?
I don't know. The packet that I have has 33 pages, so maybe I'll go back and click something else.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear.
Oh, the packet that I have has 33 pages. I think that's where the confusion came in. Is that,
There is a fresher packet online.
okay, okay.
I
Our-
discovered
The packet
today.
that I'm using has 152 pages in it. Okay. All right,
So,
Alderman,
and also, Chair Nguyen, to clear up any confusion, there are 3 versions of the book in the packet. The first 30-something pages that Councilmember Reed has is the updated red line version that I'm bringing to you tonight. The second version was what was adopted in December, no red line changes at all. And then the last version is what we brought June 7th.
okay, thank you. Okay, Councilmember Ravel?
Well, I'm just trying to figure out where we are in the packet, so.
So if you click onto, if you're under R1, if you click on the first item on R1, under R1, which reads. Yes, so it's City Council rules and revisions. So if you go back to your agenda and you click on R1, and then one of the attachments is the red line version. Does that make sense?
It's the first line.
Yeah, it is the first line. There are 3 attachments there. City Council rules and organization revisions, is a 621 PDF, and then discussion of the rules and organization of the City of Evanston, and then published December 15th, 2020, the attachment of the rules that, from December of 2020. Okay. All right. Does everyone see where we are at 9.2?
Yeah, it looks to me like page 104 of the current new packet is the same as page 14 of the 33-page short earlier packet. Just so we're all literally on the same page.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so getting to 9.2, which is the creation of the References Committee. There is an addition to 9.2, several additions to 9.2, which increase the number of standing committees from 4 to 5, adding the name of the Reference Committee, and then describing it, which is the References Committee shall establish a regular bi-monthly meeting schedule and may meet and convene additionally as needed. Okay, so I'm on page 14.
Could you take, yeah, which page of the packet?
On page 14 of 152.
Which is the same as
six-
page 104 of 152.
No,
I think it is, though, at this point.
If we look at the lower right-hand corner of a page, what number should page?
14. I'm on page 14.
Way at the very beginning?
Yeah.
That's red line, right. That's the 33. Right. We're looking at the red line, thank you.
I'm looking at the humongous packet.
Let's see.
They're all redlined.
Let's see.
The first link in the packet is the latest iterations from what we've had.
So, Councilmember Ravel, if you go back to your agenda, and the first link in the packet is the latest red line draft. Okay. We're all going to wait just a minute to make sure everyone's on the, are you on page 14? Councilmember Braithwaite, are you on page 14? Okay.
But, I'm sorry, I was late.
Yes.
We're looking at the one that is the city council rules and organization revisions for 621.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yes.
So if you're on the short agenda, it's still there. But not to confuse.
Okay. All right. So. Was she able to find it?
She uploaded a PDF, so she's looking. I think it's
Okay.
Councilmember something is showing her where it's at.
Okay, all right, so so we have these proposed changes for the References Committee. Would someone like to make a motion about those changes there, and then on to 9.3?
I'll second.
Okay. So moving down through that, under this whole subsection called standing committees, this has been amended by the staff to incorporate our discussion about the references committee. So the various changes here are, some of these are adding this to the list of our standing committees and changing the names. And then we are down at 9.7.
Okay.
You know what, actually, we probably should take a vote on that. Yes, so with respect to the changes that were just moved and seconded for 9.2, we do need to take a vote, but Councilmember Kelly, would you like to, you have the floor.
No, I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. So, Ms. Franzella, would you take a vote on the initial changes, the minor changes that we've made to 9.2? Okay. Councilmember Kelly.
I apologize. So in 9.2, it also describes the reference committee, but then there's more specific reference to the reference committee in 9.7. So
Yes, so I'm taking them section by section.
Right.
Yeah.
But I just, because part of 9.2 not only describes what are the standing committees, but then there's also a description of one committee within that. So I feel like that should be where it says that the reference committee shall establish regular bi-monthly meetings.
Should be down with 9.7.
Pardon me?
Are you saying it should be with 9.7?
That's what I'm thinking, that should be with when we discuss the reference committee and the frequency of meetings.
Well, earlier in 9.2, you can see that, I see what your point is, but it is 9.2, the original paragraph describes when each of the standing committees meet. So that this is referring to when the references committee meets is actually in keeping with the
So it seems to me that we should first then discuss the reference committee first. For example, because I'd like it to meet more often than.
Well, okay, so 9.2, we were actually just voting, we just moved and seconded the language that's in 9.2, which states that the references committee shall establish a regular bi-monthly meeting schedule and may meet and convene additionally as needed.
So can I amend that? What would I?
Well, why don't we discuss it?
Okay.
Okay, so would you like to go first?
Yeah. But, yeah, I'm a little bit confused about how we go about this. So I feel the reference committee should meet weekly so that we don't slow down the progress of making referrals. But I don't understand if that would really be discussed here.
So I would ask a question. If you have a bi-weekly meeting and I can either do it on the mic or just say.
We can't
what
hear you,
it said.
Peter.
Okay, it was just more clarification. So we're already doing it bi-monthly, which is twice, but then you have the ability to convene additional as needed. So for something that's brand new, twice a month with references probably is a decent drumbeat. And if for whatever reason you need to meet on a weekly basis, then it provides that provision in the red line. I don't think we do anything weekly, so I'd be curious.
Well, we currently we do referrals on a weekly basis. I would say there's some referral always happening every week. And so, right now I can pick up the phone, I can talk to City Manager Storley and
Sure.
regarding a reference or a referral. And so I feel that it's very important in order not to slow down the process, that if we're going to move to form a committee of such for referrals, that this committee meets weekly.
All right, Councilmember Revelle?
Well, since the city council itself and the standing committees, except for human services, meet roughly bi-monthly, I would think that the references committee meeting bi-monthly would fall into a sequence with the city council and standing committee schedule. So and then, if something really urgent comes up, there's an opportunity to meet in addition.
Thank you. Councilmember Reed?
In response to that, my understanding is council tends to meet about 3 times a month. Am I wrong on that?
Well, the third, when we meet a third time, it's usually for some kind of special presentation, so it would be probably not the kind of meeting where we'd be discussing one of these referred items.
Councilmember Kelly?
So referrals would be made also to committees, which we have committees and council meetings every week. And I think even though the other committees meet once a month or once every 2 weeks, we have to look at the nature of this committee and the impact of this committee. And so that's why I really think it's important that this committee meet every week.
Councilmember Fleming?
I don't want to spend. So I do get the meeting weekly. I think I guess what will we do if we don't have any referrals to go over that week? Or do we want to bring a committee together if there's only 2 referrals? I mean, I think I understand the weekly just so we don't, come every 2 weeks and we have like 10 referrals to deal with. But I guess I'm thinking through what then do we do if we have no referrals, or if we only have 1 referral and we've kind of set a public meeting for weekly, then we're not here. I don't want to set a weekly meeting just thinking of our residents, and if we don't have referrals and we don't meet, then we have to notice that, and then people think we're not being transparent or something. I guess I just want to make sure, I understand the weekly because I don't want to have a bottleneck of referrals either, but I don't want to overcommit and then we end up canceling twice a month because we don't have referrals, or it's not worth bringing the committee together for 1 referral.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
I think another point to make is the issue of quorum. Because if you're meeting every week, there's a potential that you might not have quorum. And, there's a commitment on the part of everyone who's agreeing to be part of the committee, but nevertheless, that's a possibility. And then you have a problem.
And I think again, this is all new, so we could say, so as it says, and may meet and convene additionally as needed, we could kind of informally on the committee say if we have 4 or more referrals or 3 or more referrals in the queue or whatever the number is, we'll go ahead and, have that additional meeting so that, again, they're not meeting and having 10 things to deal with or 20, whatever it is. I guess I just get worried if we set this up and then we end up canceling a lot, that people start feeling like it's not working, or, I don't want the residents to get skeptical of something new if it ends up canceling a lot just because we don't have enough referrals to manage. But again, I don't know what the flow of referrals is going to be, so it's a little bit of, what if we left it like this and then the committee, as it kind of establishes how it's working and what's working and whatever, can come back and say, we actually do need to change it to meet weekly, or kind of give an update to right, because this committee is going to be checking with the council all the time because we're going to be doing referrals, or they're going to be doing referrals. So maybe we can kind of check in to say, or they can check in and say, hey, this first month we do need to meet weekly because of X, Y, and Z, but now we've got a system and it's not that often. Or I just always get hesitant when we start canceling a lot of meetings and public notices because people get skeptical that we're not being transparent.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. Let's see, I have Councilmember Reed and Councilmember Kelly again.
I just want to note that this committee will be dealing with referrals from staff as well. And so if you think about an average council agenda, or everything that's going even to a committee is running through this referrals committee. So everything that's going to appear on agenda will go through the referrals committee. And I can imagine that's quite a load. I mean, just thinking about the packets that I receive going into a Monday night where you have 2 committee meetings then council, each one of those items would be working its way through the referrals committee.
Well, I have a comment to make later on when we get to that language about staff references, but I think we should just stick to the scheduling right now. So Councilmember Kelly, and then I think we should take a vote. Unless, Councilmember Braithwaite, you have not had an opportunity to speak. Would you like to?
No, I'm good on the current language.
Okay.
And the flexibility.
Okay. Councilmember Kelly?
So I wonder if we couldn't initially, I am just very concerned about the impact that this will have in terms of slowing down progress. And I wonder if we shouldn't, I can agree to that, but maybe start out initially every week for 1 month just to make sure everything's, running smoothly, and then move to bi-monthly.
Again, I support that. I don't, do we, if we start that way and then move back to bi-monthly, we have to come back and change the rules.
Right.
So if we start this way and then the committee decides, hey, we need to meet weekly to, kind of get our footing, that still would be noticed as a public meeting, but it wouldn't then make us have to come back and change the rule, remember to change the rules later, because then we're just kind of flip-flopping the rules a lot, which takes some time. And I'd hate for us to forget to do that, and then again, we're noticing meetings that aren't happening.
To note, we could do it in the inverse.
I'm sorry, I have Mayor Biss next.
Just a quick, one way to do that is to keep the language as is. I'm happy to commit to meet weekly for the first month, which is certainly allowable under the draft as it's written. I would even recommend that the people on this committee agree to reserve a weekly time with the understanding there may have to be a bunch of extra meetings scheduled, but to Councilmember Fleming's point, without a ton of clarity in advance about exactly what the workflow will be, if we leave it written as at least twice a week with the opportunity for more, we prepare our schedules as though there might be more, but we don't then put ourselves in a position of later having to cancel a bunch of meetings and confuse the public.
Yeah. I would agree with Councilmember Fleming and Mayor Biss on this. The option is available, and I think since this is a new committee, we need to see what the flow of work is like. And I will say, my experience is the public definitely notices when meetings are canceled, and they want to know why. And it might be, then we'd have to provide an explanation, whereas if you want to add a meeting, the reason for adding a meeting is right there. It's right on the agenda. That's why we need a meeting. So I think we should leave the language as it is. It's very flexible. The reference committee members are listening to this discussion, and if it needs to be revisited, we can in the future. All right. Ms. Van Selno, would you call the roll, please? And this is on the changes to 9.2.
Councilmember Kelly.
Aye.
Councilmember Braithwaite.
Aye.
Councilmember Wynn.
Aye.
Councilmember Nusma.
Aye.
Councilmember Burns.
Aye.
Councilmember Sufferton.
Aye.
Councilmember Ravel.
Aye.
Councilmember Reed.
Aye.
Councilmember Fleming.
Aye.
Mayor Biss.
Aye.
Motion carries. Next, we have yes, Councilmember Kelly.
Are we going in order or not necessarily?
I think we should proceed in order so we all can follow what we're doing.
Because I had a couple of questions about previous items in the rules packet. Is that?
Why don't we finish this section and then we'll
Okay.
go back?
Okay.
Okay. So just to, we need to make sure everything lines up correctly. 9.3 is Rules Committee, 9 alderpersons and the mayor. The jurisdiction of this committee shall be as follows. And subsection F has been modified to include the language other than the references committee. And subsection H has been amended to read, I'm not sure. The words council and individual alderperson or the mayor have been stricken, and the words references committee has been added. Do we need to, we should take a vote on that. So would someone like to move that and someone like to second that, please?
We're on item 9.3, page.
Those are the changes in 9.3. Sorry.
So moved, Madam Chair.
Second.
Alderman Ravel?
Well, if I'm looking at the right version here, it still says Transportation Committee under A.
It does, yes. Could we strike 9.3 subsection A,
Good catch.
second line, Transportation Committee?
Somebody's paying attention.
Could we have a motion and a second on that?
I move that we strike Transportation Committee from 9.3A.
Second.
Could you take, we didn't vote on the first one. Yes, first we're voting on the changes regarding the References Committee, and then we'll vote on the motion regarding the Transportation Committee language.
Got it.
Okay, so the first one is these changes on the References Committee. Did you vote?
Councilmember, you ready?
Councilmember Newsman, did you want to speak to
Yeah,
one of those two
I just
things?
want to speak to 9.3H, the proposed change to strike individual alderperson, mayor, or council as referrers to the Rules Committee. Do such referrals have to now come, under this proposal, such referrals to the Rules Committee would have to come from the Reference Committee, and an individual alderman could not make a referral to the Rules Committee.
That's a good question.
I think we would like to reserve that power as individual aldermen to make a reference to the Rules Committee.
Good catch.
Yep, I would agree.
Would Mayor Biss?
I'm not necessarily opposed, but what's the difference between the Rules Committee and any other standing committee for the purposes of this discussion?
Well, our Rules Committee is a committee of all of us that discusses the rules that govern us. So not necessarily substantive matters that come before the council, but it is still things that the staff has to research and prepare for.
Right, so what's just Councilmember Newsom, but can you explain what you're getting at, because I think I'm not following.
If one of the council members should have a suggestion to amend the rules, I'm questioning whether that would have to go through the Reference Committee, or could we go straight to the Rules Committee with that? I would tend to think that going straight to the Rules Committee would be something that I would prefer to do. Open to other points of view on the matter.
Mayor Biss, would you like to respond?
I guess it's not clear to me why would that be your preference for the Rules Committee and not, for instance, the Human Services Committee?
It depends on reference, I think, but now we're way into the weeds.
Rules Committee is internal, focused not on public policy, but on internal policy. And, having a more direct voice in that discussion would seem to me to be appropriate.
Okay. Councilmember Reed?
I just want to echo what Mayor Biss was thinking. That was my thought. I would like to see references go forward to any committee. I think the Rules Committee does deal with matters that don't just affect this body, but affect the public. I mean, we've seen matters relating to the clerk's office move through rules, matters relating to FOIA, relating to OMA, relating to elections move through the Rules Committee. And so the Rules Committee deals with matters that are just as important to the public as any other committee. And maybe in a sense, because it kind of governs the way we do everything else, it's of some of the utmost importance of how we. So I think it makes sense that either we go all in or we go not all in. Yeah, that's it.
Okay. Any further discussion on this? Okay. So we are now going to take the vote on the changes that we've just discussed for section 9.3. Ms. Frenzelman.
So I'm sorry, we're taking a vote including Mr. Newsman. Did he make a motion? I wasn't.
I did not make a motion.
Okay.
No, right.
And the vote is on 9.3 F and H.
F and H. Mm-hmm.
Not A. Not A yet. Okay.
Didn't you strike transportation in A?
Yeah, you made a motion and it was seconded, and so that.
Oh, actually, so we can make all of those changes simultaneous. So could we merge those motions?
Maybe a new motion to amend.
Yes. Could someone move to amend?
So I withdraw my motion and replace it with a motion to amend the original motion by adding in the act of striking the words Transportation Committee from 9.3A.
Second.
Now, Ms. Frenzelman, will you call the vote?
Substitute.
Councilmember Kelly.
Aye.
Councilmember Braithwaite.
Aye.
Councilmember Nguyen.
Aye.
Councilmember Newsma.
Aye.
Councilmember Burns.
Aye.
Councilmember Sufferton. Councilmember Ravel.
Aye.
Councilmember Reed.
Aye.
Councilmember Fleming.
Aye.
Mayor Biss.
Aye.
All right, motion carries. So the next section we're going to discuss is 9.7.
Was that the vote on the amendment or the motion?
Oh, that was
Both.
that was
It
the.
both. Both.
It was both.
You removed yours and he substituted.
Great.
So just for my clarity, because I did have to step out for a second, was the vote that was just taken on the amendment to strike Transportation Committee from A as well as accept the amendments to F and H?
Yes, I think Mayor Biss made a substitute motion that was seconded by Alderman Nusma.
Thank you.
Was the intention.
All right, on to References Committee. Let me just read it in, Councilmember Kelly, and then I'll call on you. This is References Committee. So we have Perens, Mayor, who serves as chair, which is added in, and 2 alderpersons. The sole duty of this committee shall be to consider references made by the mayor, an alderperson, or the city manager, and to refer them to a board, committee, commission, or the city council with instructions as to whether they shall appear on the relevant agenda for discussion, introduction, action, or for introduction and action. So that's the language that we're going to be discussing. And if someone would like to make a motion with respect to that, then we can start the discussion.
I will move the language as drafted in 9.7.
Second.
All right, so now we have discussion. Councilmember Kelly?
I'm sorry, I had a comment on 9.4. I didn't understand that we were going to skip over those.
Can we go back to that and after we finish all of the items that we have with respect to the References Committee? Okay? Thank you. Councilmember Reed?
So just for clarity for myself and the public, how will this committee be, how will the 2 members of this committee be selected?
Would anyone like to answer
It
that?
seems as though from the draft that it would be, the Rules Committee doesn't appoint, as is the case for all other standing committees, so is the mayoral appointment.
Mayor Biss?
Rule 9.3A says that one of the Rules Committee's responsibilities is assignment of alderpersons to standing committees.
Thank you. I'm sorry. I looked at F and misread it there.
Okay.
No, yeah, you're right, because F says,
That's for the chair.
got it, yeah, you're right,
yeah.
okay. Then we need to add in, I'm sorry, you didn't call on me. Are you calling?
Go ahead, Councilmember Fleming.
Now that he brought up, never mind, I'm confused. Okay, so I would say that since this is a committee that we just talked about impacts all of us, we could, either nominate people. So, if you want to be on the committee, if you want to serve on the committee, then we could do a vote of the Rules Committee. Seems like a fair enough way. So then, we could also potentially do a rotation, but everyone might not want to serve on it. We had that discussion last time about the Budget and Finance Committee. So, does it make sense to add to somebody who doesn't want to be on the committee? So I would just say maybe a vote of the Rules Committee for folks who are interested.
Yeah, I would prefer to see either a rotation schedule that allowed, a rotation of members for folks who wanted to serve. I can see. Can someone explain why the 2 members were chosen for this committee? Or 2 members and the mayor?
Mayor Biss, I'll call on you to respond, but I also have Councilmember Braithwaite and Councilmember Kelly. Councilmember Braithwaite, you haven't spoken yet. Would you like to speak to this?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm having some concerns and questions about the language of this committee choosing what's for discussion, introduction, and also action and introduction. Not so much the discussion, we're familiar with that. Not so much introduction, we're familiar with that, but to determine whether something is for introduction and action, I think has been, in the past, the only thing that we've done for introduction and action are typically with liquor and businesses, from my memory. That's overarching. Now, there's some things that we've done also with like transportation signs And I think for a body who's concerned with transparency and good government, the introduction and action, if we've seen in the past in just 2 months, it gets to be a bit problematic. Typically, when the normal progression could be discussion, community, ward meeting, followed by an introduction and then an action, and if for whatever reason we're fast-tracking it outside of the ones that I'm normally familiar with, which are liquor, which are tied to a business that's either opening or transitioning out. So yes, you can move forward with those very simple things when there's a business that's opening or closing. But other larger issues that staff may need more time, I'm not going to cite, things in the past, but that right there, I would think that we should all be concerned about. If I'm trying to move something and you have not had an opportunity to speak to your constituents or key stakeholders, I would hope that someone would be concerned about that if I was on this reference committee.
Well, that is a good point. So I would like clarification on that as well. So would the drafter of this language explain what the final phrase for introduction and action is covering? Is that to permit suspension of the rules and action? But it's, I would not want that to be an automatic.
No, it's certain, that's a good point. It certainly wouldn't, the intent is not to permit, to circumvent the suspension of the rules. The point is really in a way to address Councilmember Braithwaite's concern. Items appear on agendas in a variety of different ways already that occurs, and the goal is to ensure that they're appearing on an agenda however they appear pursuant to something that was done in public and transparently. I'm not suggesting that it'll happen more frequently than it's happened typically or less frequently. I'm just saying let's have total clarity about why something is appearing on an agenda so that if someone does in fact feel that it went too fast, they know who to talk to about their concerns. If we want to impose additional restrictions on when things can appear on agendas for introduction and action, that seems like a fine idea to me. I just think that if it's going to appear on an agenda that way, folks ought to know whose decision that was and why.
Generally, what we've done is if something appears for an introduction and action, it will say then at the request of Councilmember Nguyen, the suspension of the rules is requested in order to have introduction and action. And that's part of the agenda. And then if Councilmember Nguyen does not succeed in getting unanimous suspension of the rules, it simply is introduced.
Right.
So do we need that phrase for
I don't
introduction
think
and
so.
action?
Well, the question is, if we strike it, does it then become, do you continue, Councilmember Nguyen, as the person seeking that suspension of the rules? Would you still be able to do that if that phrase were struck? If so, then I think we ought to strike it.
I would believe that you would be able to, because then our other rules would take effect, would start operating, because once it's at the council, then the other rules are operating. The References Committee refers to getting something onto the agenda initially, and then from there, the rest of our rules, I would think, then start to operate.
That's it.
That's fine with me then.
Okay. Councilmember Braithwaite, did you have a response to that?
No, well, I was just going to make the motion that we strike the for introduction and interaction and then replace it with the request of a particular alderperson, which is already in our rules. So I think you just strike the whole thing and then we're good.
May I make a,
Yes.
sorry, good evening, Kelly Ganderski, Deputy City Manager. If we're striking the term introduction and action, it seems to me an item only ever comes onto the agenda for discussion, introduction, then it wouldn't be intro and action. It would never come on just for action on a city council agenda.
You are correct.
So I think we should just say appears on the relevant agenda, period. That would be my suggestion, but I will go with obviously whatever the council feels is best.
That's
There's
clean
one
language.
minor exception to that, and that's certain resolutions might be for
Yes.
action.
That is true.
Well, I would recommend at the minimum that we retain the determination of whether it's appearing on an agenda for discussion or introduction, or discussion or some sort of vote. I think that distinction is important.
Well, if we don't include the term action, then it would be, if it's something that is a resolution that appears for action, then it would be in violation of this provision.
That's correct. We can end it with just action then, if that makes sense.
Okay. All right. So, Councilmember Braithwaite has moved this, and I recognize we have not finished the other discussion about membership on the References Committee, but we've moved this.
Oh,
and
sorry.
And I believe it's been seconded.
But we didn't finish, I wanted to add a discussion point for that.
Oh, I'm sorry. Councilmember Fleming.
Yeah, and then I also don't want to forget about Councilmember Reed's question that,
About membership.
was it about membership or something else?
Yeah, it was
Okay.
regarding membership.
Y3, I think, was the question, right?
Yeah.
Y2.
Yeah.
There's
Y2
lots of
alderpersons.
branching of this discussion.
Yeah, so I just don't
Right,
want
yeah.
to be
So-
forgotten down here at the end. So I think, and I don't know that if this is in the rules, someone can tell me and I can find it later, but Alderman Braithwaite's description of introduction and action, if that is a rule, we should revisit it at some time because I've seen all kind of things go on for introduction and action, not just in those. So maybe when you started, or maybe the goal was kind of those higher arching things that you mentioned, but I've seen all kind of things for introduction and action. So
And
I'm
if I
fine.
can clarify, that was just, I was referencing that as past practice.
Right, and
not
so I'm
as
saying
a
if we want to
hard
make a
rule.
practice which maybe makes sense, what can qualify as introduction and action, we should, maybe not tonight, but do that at some point, because I'm fine having a practice, but now we just do anything, it seems like, whenever an alderperson asks. But my point about introduction and action in this sense was, my vision kind of this committee is that things are very standard and streamlined, and there are ways in which you make referrals. You can make them here, but you need to also make them in writing with clearer, explanations and requests of staff and whatever that is. And so if we got to that point and did it that way, it could be something where if I'm making a referral, I can say on that document, I would like to suspend the rules and have this for introduction and action, right? Versus the committee, if I make a referral about whatever it is and say it goes to Human Services, I'm not sure at what time the council member can say, oh, you know what, can that be for introduction and action? I mean, again, this is part of what this committee will have to dance and figure its way out, but if it starts at a committee and then it makes then it makes the council agenda, that council member needs to be mindful and say, hey, I want my item for introduction and action. And so we could do it either way, I guess is my point. Somebody can say that when they make the referral, that I would like this expedited. But I don't need to complicate it, I just don't think I don't think it's totally worth striking, but to back that up, if we want to have clear parameters of what things can be introduction and action, we should do that as well, because my experience has been that it's been mostly a lot of things that people have felt like are very important or time sensitive that then need to be introduction and action. Our last meeting of this previous council, almost everything was introduction and action. So I think we need to be just mindful of when we use that and making sure that's really special and verified and not just, oh, I forgot.
And Councilmember Fleming, I would agree with you, and I will say, in my experience on the council, suspending the rules for action was rare. When it started to become slightly more common was when we realized that if we were granting a liquor license, that if we were in unanimity about granting the liquor license, then we realized that gave the restaurateur 2 more weeks to open their business and get going. And so that's when it started to move to recognizing that businesses who needed the council approval also needed us to give them that additional 2 weeks when there was unanimity on the council.
Right, but now it is not just, now it's used for a variety of things. So
Right, and I agree with that. But I also see the value of requiring introduction but if you bundle it together as introduction and action, then you're cutting out the public on that.
So then we just need to make sure that people are clear if they make the referral, when they need to then say, I would like this for introduction and action, and who's making that decision. And we don't have to do that right this second, but that needs to be something that's flushed out.
Can I make a suggestion for the drafting?
Yes. Go ahead, Mr. Cummings.
So instead of striking with a request by a particular alderperson and striking for introduction and action, we just leave the language with the request by a particular alderperson for introduction and action.
Wow, it was right there all along. Okay.
I mean, Councilmember Fleming's point, you now have in this referral, when we get to talking about how you make a reference, you have it now that a specific alderperson has said, I would like this for introduction and action. If you leave that
Right.
language that way.
I will say, all right, I know we're discussing angels dancing on the heads of pins, but there are times when someone will, a resident whose item is coming to the council will then come to a member of the council and say, I didn't know that I could get introduction and action, and can you see if the rules can be suspended? Because we don't always know when we make the reference that something has become particularly time sensitive. So as long as that option is still available, then I'm comfortable with that.
And I think 20.1 ultimately allows, and so also for clarity for the members of the council, the only thing that this applies to is ordinances.
Right.
So if that becomes the case, that you have someone that comes to their representative and says, can this be for introduction and action? Maybe it's a business owner, maybe it's someone else, maybe it's the leaf blower ordinance, who knows? But someone can come to the representative and say, I would like this for introduction and action. At some step along the way, the rules allow for that to happen because 20.1 is still in the rules. So it's not dependent wholly on the references committee,
Right.
but if you make the reference and ask for it early on, we know along the way that it's going to be for introduction and action.
Right, but the suspension of the rules would still be required. That's fine.
And that would still be a vote that needs to be had, even if the referral
Yeah.
committee said so.
I'm fine with
Yes.
that then. Okay.
Yes.
All right. So,
As referred to in 20.1.
so where are we on this? Okay, so at this point, Councilmember
I'm
Kelly. Oh, go ahead.
I apologize. I think that if you're referencing back to 20.1, then 9.7 should reference back to 20.1 as allowed pursuant to Rule 20.1.
Very good. Okay.
So, and I know that Councilmember Reed's question should be answered, it needs to be answered. I just want to make sure before you guys take any vote that I have the right language on 9.7.
All right. So would someone who made the motion like to read the correct language?
But should we clarify the two members before we,
Well, can we just vote on this and then we'll go back to the two members?
yeah, except for in this
Part
it
of the
says two
language.
members.
Yeah, it's part of the language.
Well, I think Alderman Braithwaite amended
excuse me,
the
yeah.
original motion, which was the language as presented, and so we're just voting on Alderman Braithwaite's amendment.
Right.
To
As
the
I understand it,
language.
there's a recommendation that the Councilmember Braithwaite perhaps revise his amendment, then we vote on that amendment, and then continue the discussion. Is that
On the
right,
main
Mr.
item,
Cummings?
Okay, so I'm not sure I heard completely.
I think they're trying to say what Nick said. Or they refer-
So that we
but I
should,
can
okay, so
withdraw.
we're going to
I struck
return,
it.
okay, we're going to return to the discussion on who chooses the two aldermen to serve, I'm just going to say.
We
the
should take
council-
the vote on Alderman Braithwaite's motion, and then go back to the original motion, which was,
And then we'll alter
9.7
this.
is- yeah.
Okay, that's fine.
So is everyone clear with the language that we're striking it, then?
Can you reread that language, please?
All right, so the reference committee, mayor who serves as chair, and two alderpersons, the sole duty of the committee shall be to consider references made by the mayor, an alderperson, or city manager, and to refer them to a board, committee, or commission, or the city council, with instructions to whether they shall appear on the relevant agenda for discussion, introduction, action.
or with the request of a particular.
Yeah, that wasn't his amendment, but my suggestion was to actually leave all of that language for the last sentence.
With the addition of, in accordance with
Yeah.
paragraph
20.1.
pursuant to 20.1.
Yes. So Alderman Braithwaite, are you including or with a
My
request?
amendment would be with pursuant of.
All right,
Or with a request by a particular alderperson for introduction and action pursuant to section 21.
Correct.
Because we would
Correct.
still have to vote on that.
okay, yes. So you made that motion. Do we have a
Second.
Second, all right. Ms. Franzelno, would you call the roll?
I certainly will. Councilmember Kelly?
Aye.
Councilmember Braithwaite?
Aye.
Councilmember Nguyen.
Aye.
Councilmember Nusma.
Aye.
Councilmember Burns.
Aye.
Councilmember Sufferton. Councilmember Ravel.
Aye.
Councilmember Reed.
Aye.
Councilmember Fleming.
Aye.
Mayor Biss.
Aye.
So now we're back to the point of the number of people on the committee.
Well, now we're back to the issue of how we arrive at the two council members who serve on the References Committee.
Yeah, and just a point of information.
Could you turn on your light, Councilmember Reed, so I can...
Point of information. And just point of information, when a council member has the floor, they have a 5-minute period, and included in that 5-minute period is a question and answer period. So just if, in the future, if I would appreciate if we can allow for that question during that period without...
I recognize that. We launched off onto that. There's a lot of branching going on in all of this, so we are coming back to this now. So now we are back to Mayor Biss, who is going to discuss bring in his 2 cents on how we arrive at those two members.
Well, I was actually just going to respond to Councilmember Reed's question about why the number 2, which is what I understood your question to be. So my view is that this committee would benefit from having 2 characteristics. One is an odd number of members for obvious reasons, and one is a relatively small number of members because, as everyone has alluded to, we don't want this to slow things down. We want it to be nimble and efficient. And so 3 is a pretty small odd number, and I thought it was that's seemed to me to be the right way to go.
Thank you. I would like to see if we are. I think those are swell reasons to have the committee small and nimble. I think we could make the committee even more nimble by adding a rotation. So I would like to hear how folks feel about having a rotation of this committee every 2 to 3 months.
Could you say the last phrase again?
Sorry, I forgot that. I'm interested in having I'm making a motion to add language that this committee would rotate. The 2 alder people on the committee, the mayor, of course, would stay, but the 2 alder people would rotate on a quarterly basis, every 2 months or quarterly.
Well, seeing no lights right now, I'll jump in. I think that's much too rapid a rotation.
Is there a second? Since I made that.
I think the way that the process that happens frequently with items that come eventually to the council is sometimes multi-month. And so by the time someone, there's a reference made, and by the time it actually gets to the point where it's going to the council, there's a whole new set of members of this committee. I think people need to get, this is a brand-new committee. We need to allow them time to operate. They really need to understand the volume and flow of references that are coming from this council. They'll need time to consult with staff and also see how the staff is handling the workload. So I think we're going to defeat the purpose of this reference committee to properly allocate the time if we are constantly changing the members. So I would be very much opposed to a rotation with that. I think people should serve for 2 years, because that you really need that amount of time, I would think, to understand and become experienced. Okay, so Councilmember Reed, and then Councilmember Fleming, did you turn your light on?
I did have my light on, but I think you covered some of my points, so I was going to just, for the
Madam
sake
Chair,
of...
sorry, there was a motion, so we need to see if there's a second before we further
I
discussion.
apologize. Thank you. We need a second with respect to that motion.
I'll second.
Okay, so now, so Councilmember Kelly.
Was that a motion?
Yeah, he made a motion.
Councilmember Reed moved an amendment, and there was never a second, so now there's a second, so we can continue the discussion. I'm sorry, I just want to make sure we
Right.
didn't get lost.
Councilmember Reed's motion was to have the members of the References Committee rotate every
On
quarter.
a quarter, yeah.
Yeah. So Councilmember Kelly?
There's no, in 9.7, there's no reference to the time that would be served, right? I mean, it's pretty open. So, I mean, my only thought is that in the name of efficiency, and because I think this will be a lot of work, and currently, right now, staff, who's here, 5 days a week, is handling this, and I'm just very concerned that it will require a lot of work. It's going to have to require a lot of work if we're going to move things along, and that's why I think we really should be considering rotation, because we don't want people getting so burned out and not meeting if we need an extra meeting, because it's too costly in terms of time. So I think we really should consider, I don't know what that time should be, maybe it's 4 months, but I think because of the holding the bar high on our expectations with regard to this committee, we should be rotating.
Mayor Biss?
I'm certainly open to the notion of rotating and want to be flexible here. I do think actually in keeping with council members Reed's and Kelly's priorities, I go in a different direction in terms of the duration of the rotation. When Councilmember Reed talked about nimbleness, and Councilmember Kelly talked about holding this whole process to a high standard, I think getting a real rhythm and developing a pattern of doing this effectively is going to be valuable, both in terms of doing it well and in terms of doing it efficiently. And so I would strongly encourage, if we want to write a rotation period into the rule, that it be a significantly longer duration. I believe Chair Nguyen mentioned 2 years. That's sort of the ballpark. I mean, I could imagine going higher, I could imagine going lower, but 3 months strikes me as not enough to really develop the patterns and rhythm that I think this will most benefit from.
Councilmember Reed?
I just do want to note that this committee seems like it should be a fairly kind of perfunctory committee and just assigning things without too much fanfare. And so I don't think that it's happy to amend to a year or something along those lines, or 6 months. But to a point that was raised earlier regarding, if it were 3 months or if it were 6 months, that sometimes this committee is only referring things to committees, and then they're done with it. Once it's referred to a committee, the referral committee is out of the game on it. And so I think it would make it. Once they refer it, it's done, and I don't think we have to. It has to be a super complicated process. And I think the goal is to just have a transparent process where we know that these things are coming to an agenda. I think. We should make sure that we're building, equity into this to ensure that, we're having equal representation, particularly amongst communities that are, some of the lower income communities in our ward, such as the 5th Ward, the 8th Ward, the 2nd Ward. And I do think we should have a healthy rotation schedule. So hearing what Mayor Biss said, I will amend my motion to have the rotation schedule occur annually.
I'm sorry, couldn't hear you.
To have the rotation schedule occur annually. As opposed to 3 months.
Seeing no second.
I'm sorry, I
Councilmember
second.
Fleming?
Sorry.
You had your light on.
I did. I'm a little lost. So your first motion was
Quarterly rotation, and now it's an annual rotation.
All right, can we finish the discussion before you make another motion? Because that's how I got lost last time. I mean, you can, I get. So are we speaking on the yearly? I'll just give my 2 cents about the rotation. Yes. I think a rotation's fine. I do think the first committee, whoever they are, 3 people, 5 people, whatever it is, they have some work to do in terms of setting up the process. And so I think if we're going to I would like us to go to a written referral that goes to the clerk so that everybody knows where the referrals go. There needs to be a sheet we use to write that. There needs to be a process for the clerk. We need to get some kind of online system so the clerk can manage it so she doesn't have 1,000 pieces of paper. I think there's some work to do to get it set up to be transparent and efficient. And if you have people who are doing that for 2 months, 3 months, meeting weekly or biweekly, I don't know why we would rush that process. I mean, I think a rotation's fine if people want to serve on it. I'm happy to have people serve on. I'm happy to serve or not serve. I don't want us to think that I don't want us to think that if I don't get on the reference committee, my things don't get through. I think that's the point of the reference committee, which is if everyone's submitting their things accurately, or not accurately, but whatever, accurately, for lack of a better term, if the reference committee gets something that doesn't make sense, we can go back and say, hey, Cicely, we need more information here to give to staff, or, this is not clear, that's not clear. And with it being a public meeting, everybody can follow along. I guess if people feel like their things are not getting represented, they can always come to the reference committee and say that. I appreciate the point of equity, but I think in this committee structure, everybody's ward deserves to be represented. I would hate for my thing not to get forward because I don't have as many non-native, speakers or whatever else we're looking at in terms of equity. So we all, serve different constituent base who need to have their items heard. But yes, so rotation, I think, a year would be fine, but just particularly thinking about the first group of people, they're going to be charged with making sure this works. And I don't think you can do that in, as you said, you can't do that in 3 months and maybe not even 6 months, because they might set up a system and then everyone says, we hate your system, go back to the drawing board, right? So you just want to give them time to make it work so when the next committee comes in, it's working. Or we can change it, but I think this will be a learning process for everyone. And the point you made about, once they refer it, it's kind of done. Maybe it's not done. Maybe they refer it and they want to make sure it's, moving along through the city staff for you, right? They don't want to just refer it into an abyss and then it's gone. So not that they're micromanaging the staff, but I would imagine part of this committee's job is once they make the referral, making sure that it either has a date to go on an agenda, it's already on an agenda, so then everyone knows where their things are. It's not just like a referral and then the next committee's coming in trying to catch up. How long has this been on the docket? Where is this thing at? So I do think a little bit of a longer period of time, at least for this first rotation of folks, is going to be necessary. And I don't know if we want to write that in or not write it in. I guess it makes sense to write it in since everything else is written in terms of rotation. I could support a year. I could see it being a little more. I think we also just have to think about being flexible. So if I were on it and I can't make the year commitment because of life changes, I would hope someone else could jump in and replace me, that we're not so rigid that, we don't have flexibility in swapping out people as life changes as well.
All right. Let's see. Councilmember Kelly.
Could we possibly call this a pilot? I mean, I'm not sure what goes into when you pass an ordinance as a pilot, but so that it's revisited in a year? Could it be a pilot ordinance? I'm just wondering.
I think you can revisit it, and you're on the rules committee. You can we can say, you can say in 6 months, or the committee can say we'll come back to you in 6 months. I would imagine in my little head, once this committee works out what it thinks is going to work, they're going to bring it back to the rules committee because you guys have to know how it's going to work, right? So the new committee would say, this is our proposal for how this committee works.
Right. I just thought if we put pilot in front of it, that sort of forces us to then assess it. Is this based on any other municipality practice?
Mayor Biss?
There are a number of municipalities that have more formal processes like this. There's a lot of commonality with Aurora. There's some commonality with Morton Grove, much to my surprise, because they're a bit smaller. I think the larger the community, the more formal all this stuff has to be. Kind of what we're trying to do here is, address the issue of there sometimes are traffic jams that result in ideas not being heard in a timely fashion. And I think that's likelier to occur in a bigger community.
It just follow up on that, and it's a challenge to us all, is I don't think and repeat that because I want to make sure that I respond to it. Thank you, sir.
The issue we're trying to address is that essentially, and I forget the words I said, so I'll say something totally different now by accident. Oops. That sometimes it happens that there's enough referrals in the pipeline that not everything can be heard at the timeline that the people who made the referral would hope it would be heard, and that there's confusion about what the priorities are and why and how much bandwidth we have to take things on, and if we don't have enough bandwidth to take everything on, how we do the triage. And the goal here is to do all that stuff in a way that's completely transparent and done by people who are accountable to the voters. All that's to say is that's solving a problem that may not exist in a community smaller than us. Maybe hasn't always existed here, but I think in a community of our size and complexity, it seems to exist right now, and I would imagine it would continue to exist in the future, at least sometimes.
Got it. So I think the greater challenge for this committee, and it's brand new, developed by a new council, the things that I see, and I'm going to quote Ray, who comes religiously, is good ideas are developed in our community, and then through participation, it bubbles up to council. And I guess I would challenge this committee if that's part of the reason that we're looking at this now, then there's an inherent flaw in that. I'll say it again, good ideas comes from our residents and they're developed over time. If I look at the last thing that was brought up, which was reparations, and we have hit many milestones with that, that actually took like 2 years of conversation before it came to city council. And so if I use that as an example, and obviously there are many more, and people can chime as they want to, I think this reference committee is going to be challenged that whoever's bringing that next big idea needs to have their stuff together, needs to document meetings that are in the community, because once it gets to the council floor, that's where the conversation stops. It's a one-directional conversational, Ray, right? The conversation typically takes place in the committee. So I will leave it at that, because I would be curious to see what this looks like. But I just think that that's important that we hold that to our chest as well. Keep in mind the resources of our staff, to your point, that we want to make sure, at least I like to make sure, that when I'm voting for something on the council floor, that it's fully baked, there's enough information that if I or anyone else votes, that we're able to explain it to our residents, and it's in black and white and filled with enough data that makes sense to us all. So I hope that makes sense.
All right, thank you. I just want to pause to make sure I understand that we all know where we are.
Yeah.
There was, is there a motion on the floor?
Yes, there.
And the motion on the floor is that the rotation take place?
Annually.
Okay. All right. So it's a motion to amend the previous motion that a rotation take place on this committee annually.
I substituted the motion, so we're just voting, if we vote on the direct amendment to the 9.7, which would include language that the committee rotates annually.
Okay. Councilmember Kelly,
So
and then
if-
Mayor Biss.
If that's not in there, what would it mean? I mean, if we didn't amend it to say rotation every
Mayor
year?
Biss wants to respond, and then I have Councilmember Newsma.
And so that's just it. So as it stands now, 9.3A controls, which means it's just the Rules Committee's call. At any time, the Rules Committee could swap people out. It's just up to us as a body of 10. My question about the motion, which is simply purely a clarification question, is what exactly does it say? Does it say that every year the Rules Committee shall do a reappointment process? Does it say that every 4 years the Rules Committee shall build out a rotation for the next 4 years? What exactly are we talking about here?
Sure, thank you for that clarification. I think it would be that every year the council, the Rules Committee would come together and determine, have an appointment meeting. And I just do want to note, to a point you made there, I think without this language, it creates, if we want to swap someone out, it creates a point of tension with our council members. If I don't like something, I think if we build in a regular rotation, then we don't have a conflict point, an unnecessary conflict point if we need to remove someone from the committee.
All right, Councilmember Newsma.
I'm just making the observation that none of the other standing committees have a rotating membership. We do rotate chairmanships of those committees, but we don't rotate memberships of those committees.
For good reasons, yeah.
I understand and respect Councilmember Reed's point. My personal opinion would be to not rotate very frequently, and I'll just leave it at that.
If I can quickly respond to your point there, which is that the other committees, as we saw with the committee selection process, we didn't really limit the number of council members. At any point, any member who wanted to serve on any committee could serve on that committee, and it seems this is the only committee where we're looking to keep a really tight, small membership, and that's why I think rotation is important.
I'm good.
All right, we have this motion on the floor. So, Ms. Francelno, would you call the roll?
Did we have a second?
Wait. There was
Alderman
a-
Kelly.
Councilmember Kelly did second it, but we didn't hear it, but I heard it because she sat next to me. And I just also wanted to point out, though, that although, to Councilmember Reed's point, at the last selection of the committees, there was no limit, the rules actually do outline the number of alderpersons that can serve on a given committee. We had to amend the rules based upon those committee assignments. So I believe one of the committees actually shrunk and another committee increased its size because of the desire of the council members to serve on the committee. So there are limits to the number of council members on these standing committees. It's just the Rules Committee had to make those calls on June 7th.
I will take the chair's privilege and say I understand the desire to have rotation, but I very much appreciate Councilmember Fleming's point that this is the inaugural committee of this type of committee in our on our council, and that they will be the ones who will be establishing the procedure and the process, obviously with input from all of us. So I would suggest that we have a 2-year, that the first membership of this committee lasts for 2 years, and then after that have an annual rotation, because that gives those original members the opportunity to really figure out what works and how it works best.
Just as a point, I think a year is plenty of time to figure out guidelines.
And I don't. Councilmember Ravel?
Well, I just want to say that I like your suggestion, Councilmember Wynn. I do think it's going to take a while to develop this process, because I think the committee's going to want to develop, I don't even know quite what the word is yet, but guidelines for how the committee is going to make a decision about priorities for the different referrals, so I do think it's certainly not going to take a whole year to do that, but it would be, I think the first year would be spent developing some of these guidelines and applying these guidelines and then making some revisions. So I do like the idea of the committee initially being able to be serve for 2 years.
Well, then I'm happy to amend this motion to 2 years and, put that there, as long as that initial committee, right, this initial committee is going to have, as we said, very important work, and we should give them a long time frame. Then any member on the council who wants to serve on that committee, I think, should be able to serve at least for that first period. So I'm happy to make the amendment to 2 years, as long as any council member who wants to serve on the committee can serve.
Well, I'm not clear on that, because we aren't going to expand the number. So if all
why
9
not?
of us want to serve, I think we've defeated the purpose. So I think we're going to have to determine the method of who serves on the committee. In the past, on other prior councils, the council voted on who could serve on which committee. I mean, that was how we did it. I think now we do it by acceptance or acclamation. But in the past, when we had the very strict limits, or not even strict, I mean, when we had the 4 people served on ANPW, 5 people served on P&D, and 5 people served on Human Services, we voted on who would serve on each one. Mayor Biss.
Yeah, just respectfully, I do think that opening up the membership to anybody, which caps it at 10 instead of 3, really strikes me as a recipe for slowing things down. And that would worry me a great deal. So that aspect of this I could not support.
I'm sorry, Mayor Biss, could you say that again? I was.
Just this, without getting into the 1 year versus 2 years, the specific suggestion to say, hey, in the first year or 2 years, anybody who wants to join without limitation can join, meaning therefore the committee might wind up having as many as 10 members rather than 3. That strikes me as putting us on a path to, that strikes me as not a recipe for success.
We might as well not have the committee.
Yeah.
Okay. Councilmember Kelly.
Can I amend your motion to what Councilmember Nguyen proposed, to the first 2 years, this committee serve for 2 years, and after that, a yearly rotation? Okay. Was that a substitute motion?
You just,
Wait,
so yes, you can.
Wait, hold on. Let's hear
You
from
can,
Mr.
I
Cummings.
guess.
So the question is, I know Councilmember Reed suggested he would amend his motion, but it was contingent. So were you formally amending your original amendment?
It certainly was contingent, but it seems as though, I'm but one member of the council, and so there was a motion and a second, and so that's what's on the floor.
I just
now.
want to make sure it was in order. That's all.
Yeah.
And so
All right.
it would appear that her motion is in order. That's
Okay, so that motion has been made and seconded. Let's vote on that. Ms. Brandselma.
Councilmember Kelly,
Aye.
Councilmember
I'm sorry, so
Braithwaite,
for clarification, it's
Wait,
2 years.
1 second, please.
No.
Wait. Okay, all right. That was my suggestion.
Oh, that was
Councilmember.
yours?
Yes, that was my suggestion.
I'm good with
Okay.
that. I'm good.
Okay,
I was
all right.
lost. I was like,
Okay.
so then why is it in?
Okay. So Mayor, Councilmember Kelly, would you restate the motion? Thank you.
The motion is that this committee, initially will serve for 2 years, and after that, every year, it will rotate every year after that. But initially, it will meet for 2 years.
Okay, thank you for that.
Okay. And we did have a second for that. So now,
You
Ms.
withdrew his motion, so this is not, okay, we're good. Thank you.
So now, Ms. Francelno, would you start again, calling the roll? We have
Councilmember Kelly,
Aye.
Councilmember Braithwaite.
Aye.
Councilmember Nguyen.
Aye.
Councilmember Nusma.
Aye.
Councilmember Burns.
aye.
Councilmember Sufferton. Councilmember Ravel.
Aye.
Councilmember Reed.
No.
Councilmember Fleming.
Aye.
Mayor Biss.
Aye.
Okay, so that's been established. Ms. Gandersky has pointed out to me that we do need to go back, and I understand we're going to go back. There is an issue with respect to the References Committee. And I'm not even going to bring up the issue about whether we all think that's a good name for this committee.
You should bring it up pretty soon if you want to bring it up.
I know. I think the Referrals Committee rolls off your tongue more, but that's just me who's trying to say it here
So amended.
many, many times. So we can leave it? So do we need to change it, make the motion to include it? We do, don't we? I don't, if it's here, it wasn't. No, that was not passed. Okay, so if everyone would go back just quickly and look at 5.6, which is on,
I've got it on page 9 on mine.
yes, page 9. 5.6.1, we do need to clean this up. It says, committees consisting of all alderpersons except the References Committee shall have their initial chair appointed by the Rules Committee.
I move 5.6.1 as presented.
Well, there's still a motion on the floor, right?
I think we just,
No, I think we've completed the rotation.
Yeah, so that language has
yeah,
been
I'm sorry.
changed, but the actual 9.7 hasn't been voted on just yet.
yeah,
Oh, what did we just vote on then?
just amendment, yeah.
Amending it to include a rotation of alderpersons.
All right, okay. So what is on the floor then now?
So the
9.7.
committee still hasn't decided to adopt 9.7 in its entirety as amended.
Okay, All right, thank you. All right, so can we call the roll on 9.7 as amended?
Yeah, but is there an opportunity to, I put my light on a while ago.
Oh, I apologize, Councilmember Burns. Yes, go ahead.
I wanted to add to 9.7, the committee shall send each referral to an appropriate body for consideration and shall make determinations about timing, sequencing, and venue in accordance with transparent criteria, or I've heard guidelines used. So I think we're assuming that guidelines will be made and created. I'd like to see that written into the rules, if everybody is okay with that. And that is a motion.
Yes, could you read it
Second.
one more time?
Can you say
please?
that again, please? I'm sorry.
The committee shall send each referral to an appropriate body for consideration and shall make determinations about timing, sequencing, and venue in accordance with transparent criteria.
And if you prefer guidelines to criteria, that, I mean, guidelines is great. I know that I wrote that without deliberately striking the word guidelines, if you prefer guidelines.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard guidelines a few times today, so guidelines is fine with me.
Okay.
I have a,
Was there a second on that?
Yeah, I seconded.
Okay. Councilmember Fleming?
yeah, that was just a lot of words for my brain to get. So, so they would establish, that's just why I was thinking the committee, the first group of committee members would be I think have to establish guidelines. I'm happy to have that in there. I think it's important. I just think if I guess the second rotation of the committee, I guess they could change the guidelines or they could just follow the guidelines. So did you say according to guidelines or creating guidelines? 'Cause I think those are two different things.
In accordance.
Okay, all right. And then what was read me that last part again, because I had another comment, but
I'll just read the committee shall send each referral to an appropriate body for consideration and shall make determinations about timing, sequencing, and venue in accordance with transparent criteria or guidelines, we're saying.
Okay, and so the venue, I don't know how much we can do about that. If we're, and I keep saying we, but if a referral comes in and it goes to Human Services because of the nature of the referral, this committee wouldn't necessarily say the venue, it would just be wherever Human Services is meeting. Is that what you mean in terms of venue?
The venue would be the committee.
No. Venue is committee, the committee itself. So Human Services.
Okay, all right. So, all right. And then the other part in terms of timeliness or just determine that a timeline, I guess I'm not sure how this reference committee could do that, right? So if I make a referral and it goes to the committee and then it goes to Human Services, well, the Human Services chair or the Human Services current agenda may be, 2 months out because they only meet once a month. And so it might be just because of the schedule they already have, this can't come up into the third month. Now, I think that's something that the reference committee and the clerk, could then report back to the referring council person to say, hey, your thing should come up in July just based on what's already on the agenda. I think that, if we're looking for more of a timeliness, that goes back to the introduction and action, which the council member, in my opinion, needs to justify. This item needs to have the rule suspended because it's time sensitive, budget sensitive, whatever that matter is. I think it's important for this committee to follow the referrals and make sure that they are moving through the appropriate committee, not committee, but, getting to the appropriate committee in a timely fashion. I would be hesitant to say that they are establishing the timeline because I don't know if they could do that without packing agendas, and then we have to all make sure if we want to commit to being here, particularly if we talk about something that's going to AP&W or P&D, and then we have council after it. And this is maybe a different discussion, but do we want to kind of cap those meetings at 10 things each or 20 things each or whatever it is? And so if this committee is going to just put things on there based on the timeline they have without considering what's already on those agendas, I would just be concerned that our meetings start running super late. So I'd be more in support of kind of them keeping up with the timeline and making sure things don't get left off because of, whatever feelings people have, but that they're not kind of cramming agendas just based on some kind of arbitrary measure.
I just want to say that I think the guidelines should consider what you just mentioned.
Yeah, and that was my goal.
Yeah, that should be written out in the guidelines.
Yes.
Yeah.
The guidelines should cover all that. So again, whoever is on the committee, this is how the committee works, and they could change that, but this is how the committee works, this is how communication works. But I think I would be concerned about anything that talks about this committee and timeliness in terms of when things go on versus them making sure things go on in a timely manner. And maybe that's what you said, and I'm just confused.
Yeah, I'm just saying this is, I mean, and I think I get what you're saying. This is pointing to, we'll consider determine timing based on the criteria.
Got it. Okay.
Or
So
the
then-
guidelines
right.
created by the reference committee or referral committee.
Yeah, so then I would support something in there about guidelines and transparency. I think I would be more concerned if we start putting in their timelines. I mean, in the language of the rules. I think timeliness should definitely be in the guidelines, but I would be concerned to put timeliness in the actual rules document. And maybe I'm being too anal on this one, but
As long as I think we both want the same
Yeah.
outcome. I want to make sure that
things are flowing.
I want to make sure that timing, sequencing, and venue has to be in the guidelines.
Yes, so
Like, those questions should be, how we make those determinations should be spelled out in the guidelines. So
Yes.
if this doesn't get at that, then we can make some
No,
changes.
I think you're right. I think we need to have, guidelines, and maybe that's a charge for this first committee, and they need to come back to this body with the guidelines and explanation of how they came up with the guidelines and how you make what the new process is, right? I would imagine that the reference committee comes back to rules to lay all that out so that everybody can understand and agree on what they are. Not that this body of 3 people is making whatever rules they want.
They would have to come back to the council anyway, right?
I don't know.
This being a committee?
Hold on. I'm not sure that we've decided that yet, because we're just starting this, right? But I have 2 other people who want to speak on this issue.
Okay.
So, Councilmember Newsma and then Mayor Biss.
I like Councilmember Burns' suggestion. I have some suggested wording that might work. I will not offer this as a motion yet, but what if we pick up the wording, the sole duty of this committee shall be to consider references made by the mayor, an alderperson, or the city manager, and, comma, based on a transparent and established set of criteria, comma, refer them to the appropriate board, committee, commission, et cetera, et cetera. Does that meet the intent of what you're trying to get at
I
here?
think that takes out the shall send each referral to an appropriate body for consideration. What I'm trying to make sure is that this committee should not be able to block or delay or slow anything down. It shouldn't decide whether or not is worthy, going to the floor at least for discussion. And so I think the end part, I'd have to hear it again, sounds fine, but the first part I think should still read shall send each referral to an appropriate body for consideration.
Yeah, the sole duty of this committee shall be to consider references made by the mayor, an alderperson, or the city manager, and here's the new part, based on a transparent and established set of criteria. That's
And
the new
shall, based on.
And shall, based on
yeah.
an established and transparent set of criteria, refer them to the appropriate board, committee, commission, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, I think
Councilmember
that-
Burns, does that
Yep.
comport with what you were
Want to make
suggesting?
an amendment?
Yeah. What, does that?
That's fine, yeah.
Okay,
It's
all
fine
right.
with me, Council.
Yeah, and I wonder if we should just, in a totality, include the referrals committee change in this motion as well, to name it referrals as opposed to references, for expedience sake.
Mayor Biss?
My comment is mercifully no longer timely.
Is what?
No longer timely.
Okay, all right. Mr. Cummings, can you tell us where we are?
So, right now, the only formal motion, because Councilmember Nusma said he didn't want to make it a motion yet, is Councilmember Burns' motion. However, I did want to point out, and maybe I'm just misunderstanding the language, you guys don't want this referrals committee to usurp any of the authority of the city manager and the mayor that are built into the rules with respect to agendas. So, just wanted to sort of make everyone aware that there is a rule in the rules that says the mayor sets the sequence of the agenda, for example. And I just want to make sure that everybody was aware of that. And so I just didn't get too far in the weeds with what this referrals committee is doing. But if you make that big of a change, it could impact other rules that we haven't discussed or already have discussed.
I think Councilmember Nusma's language, in my opinion, avoids that because it talks about the guidelines and that they shall get everything there and shall direct it. But
Essentially, yeah, my
it leaves
language-
out the sequencing part. Although, again, I do think they should make sure things are moving, but it leaves out the sequencing part that could then be up to the mayor.
And the timeliness. Yeah. All right,
So
Councilmember
if-
Nusma, did you want, go ahead.
I was going to ask him if it was a formal motion.
Unless Councilmember Burns would like to amend his motion.
Have the language better than I do at this point, so you should make
So
an amendment.
I guess I'm moving then to insert the phrase "shall," based on a transparent and established set of criteria, be inserted after "or the city manager."
And that is a substitute motion, so you don't have to vote twice on it.
That would be a
Correct.
substitute
All right,
motion.
I second that.
All right, can we vote on that substitute motion?
Mr. Nusma, can you just email that to everybody, the language?
Yes.
At some point, thank you.
Ms. Frentzelno, would you then call the roll on that? First, it's the substitute motion, and then we vote on, do we need to vote on this twice, or just once? If it's a substitute motion?
Vote on the motion, and then we have to adopt the whole 9.7.
Right, okay. So we're going to vote on the substitute motion and then adopt all of 9.7.
Councilmember Kelly.
Aye.
Councilmember Braithwaite.
Aye.
Councilmember Wynn.
Aye.
Councilmember Nusma.
Aye.
Councilmember Burns.
Aye.
Councilmember Sufferton. Councilmember Ravel.
Aye.
Councilmember Reed.
Aye.
Councilmember Fleming. Mayor Biss.
Aye.
All right, now we're going to vote on the entire 9.7, as we've been discussing. Would you call that roll, please?
I'd like to make, or is it the will that we change it to the referrals committee?
I'm sorry, I can't hear.
Is it the will of the council that we change it to the referrals committee?
Oh, that's only if everyone else wants to. We can call it the reference.
I mean, I think it makes sense because people are used to us making referrals.
Right.
During
Okay.
Call of the Worlds and stuff, so just not to confuse citizens what we're doing.
I make a motion to amend 9.7 to read the referrals committee.
And you should
And it's
include
all-
every other
yeah,
point.
And everything else that is along with it.
It's a global change.
Sure.
So
Yes,
to
so
to
second.
clarify, Councilmember Reed, you would like to change any reference in the rules to that says references to referrals?
Yes, the
Thank
whole
you.
thing. Thank you.
Second.
Councilmember Kelly.
Aye.
Councilmember Braithwaite. Councilmember Wynn.
Aye.
Councilmember Nusma.
Aye.
Councilmember Burns.
Aye.
Councilmember Sufferton. Councilmember Ravel.
Aye.
Councilmember Reed.
Aye.
Councilmember Fleming. Mayor Biss.
Aye.
Now we have to adopt the whole thing. Not all of 9.7, now called References Committee.
No referrals.
Referrals committee.
You know, we're trying to change too many things. Oh, no, that's fine. I like referrals better. Okay. Would you call the roll, Dar?
Okay. Councilmember Kelly.
Aye.
Councilmember Braithwaite.
Aye.
Councilmember Wynn.
Aye.
Councilmember Nusma.
Aye.
Councilmember Burns.
Aye.
Councilmember Sufferton. Councilmember Ravel.
Aye.
Councilmember Reed.
Aye.
Councilmember Fleming. Mayor Biss.
Aye.
Okay.
And now, Chair Wynn, you did bring up 5.6.1,
Yes.
which has now been amended to change to accept the referrals committee.
Yes. 5.6.1, which is on page 9 of our packet. So we need to change the language there. So it reads, it shall read now, committees consisting of all alderpersons except the referrals committee, that's the new language, shall have their initial chair appointed by the rules committee.
So moved.
Second.
All right. Could you call the roll on that, please?
No discussion.
Councilmember Kelly.
Aye.
Councilmember Braithwaite.
Aye.
Councilmember Wynn.
Aye.
Councilmember Nusma.
Aye.
Councilmember Burns.
Aye.
Councilmember Sufferton. Councilmember Ravel.
Aye.
Councilmember Reed.
Aye.
Councilmember Wynn. I'm sorry.
Aye.
I'm sorry, and I'm looking right at the name. Councilmember Fleming. Mayor Biss.
Aye.
And Chair Nguyen,
Yes,
if I can make a suggestion,
yes.
there is another section dealing with the now referrals committee.
Yes.
That needs to be discussed. And there's also the Budget and Finance Committee to be discussed. But as long as before you get to the Budget and Finance, there are some changes that were given to me today in 9.4.
Why don't we go back and do that? And then we do have to deal with 9.10.3. So 9.4. Yes, Councilmember Kelly?
So 9.4, I'd like to strike finance from duties of the AP&W. I'd also like to strike liaison with the police and fire pension boards. So both of those would go to the Finance and Budget Committee.
Is there a second?
Can you, I'm sorry, I'm not following where you are here. Oh, so 9.31? No.
I'm sorry, 9.4, right? Are we on 9.4?
It's
On 9.4 for AP&W, I'm moving that we strike finance so that will be with the Finance and Budget Committee.
Thank you.
And also liaison with the police and fire pension, that would also go with the Finance and Budget Committee.
Is there a second?
I'm just trying to read it, I'm sorry.
Second.
So for clarity, there are future amendments creating the Budget and Finance Committee. And what Councilmember Kelly is asking is that those functions be taken from APW and put into the Budget and Finance Committee.
I understand. Yes. All right.
No, not caught up.
Okay. Seeing no lights on this, Ms. Frantelmo, would you please call the roll?
Councilmember Kelly?
Aye.
Councilmember Braithwaite? Councilmember Nguyen?
Aye.
Councilmember Nusma?
Aye.
Councilmember Burns?
Aye.
Councilmember Sufferton? Aye. Councilmember Ravel?
Aye.
Councilmember Reed?
Aye.
Councilmember Fleming?
Aye.
Mayor Biss?
Aye.
All right, that motion passes. Mr. Cummings, then, is the next item that you wanted to deal with, should we go back to the References Committee?
Yes, so
Referrals Committee?
the next major amendment, other than renumbering of items, the next major amendment is 9.10.3.
Right. Let's take that up. All right, so this is 9.10.3 is references, it's referrals. Committees, boards, and commissions composed entirely of alderpersons shall consider matters referred to them by the Referrals Committee. Referrals by alderpersons, the mayor, and the city manager must be made in writing and transmitted to the city clerk, who shall maintain a list of referrals which must be made public as quickly as practicable. Staff referrals shall be forwarded to the city manager, who may transmit them to the clerk for publication and consideration by the Referrals Committee. Only time-sensitive or emergency items may be placed directly on an agenda by the city manager. Items that have been referred to a standing committee shall only appear on a city council agenda after passage by that standing committee, or reassignments by the Referrals Committee. Mayor Biss.
I move that we amend this by striking the last 6 words, or reassignment by the Referrals Committee.
I'd second that. Seeing no lights, would you call the roll with respect to that, please?
You got 2 lights.
Are you?
I apologize. Councilmember Ravel, Councilmember Reed.
I don't have a comment on that particular motion.
Okay. Councilmember Reed, did you have a comment on that?
No, but I do have a comment after.
You did or did not?
With one, there wasn't. Was there a motion on the floor in the first? So this is the original motion that you're making?
Good point. There's no motion on the floor.
Yeah.
Right.
Sorry.
Would someone like to move the changes, please?
I move the changes to 9.10.3.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, thank you. Now, Mayor Biss, would you like to move your,
I move to amend Councilmember Fleming's motion by striking the last 6 words, or reassignment by the Referrals Committee.
Second, I was the second. Okay. All right. All those in favor, actually, Ms. Francelno is going to call the roll.
Councilmember Kelly.
Aye.
Councilmember Braithwaite. Aye. Councilmember Wynn.
Aye.
Councilmember Nusma.
Aye.
Councilmember Burns.
Aye.
Councilmember Sufferton.
He stepped away.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't do it. Councilmember Ravel.
Aye.
Councilmember Reed.
Aye.
Councilmember Fleming. Mayor Biss.
Aye.
Okay. I would like to make a motion with respect to this. I would like to strike, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, on the 6th line down, the sentence that starts, "Staff referrals shall be forwarded to the city manager, who may transmit them to the clerk for publication and consideration by the Referrals Committee." If I could get a second, I'd explain. So I read through this, and we don't have staff referrals that are made. The staff comes to members of committees with using their expertise to raise issues that they think are important for the committee to consider. And the example I'll give that I've mentioned to a couple people is when we had transportation and parking still as a committee, our transportation coordinator came to the committee to explain that electric scooters were coming towards us, and that Chicago had already taken steps to regulate them, and that she felt that we needed to take those steps and get that ordinance on our books as well before the electric scooters arrived here in Evanston. And the committee took that item up and then worked on that. So that was something that came from the staff based on their expertise in the area, where they are watching all of the things that are happening in other cities, reading all of the trade publications and newspapers, and figuring out what's critical. So staff doesn't really make referrals. Staff brings items to the attention of the committees via the chairs. So it would significantly impede the flow of committee work if the staff had to make a referral to the Referrals Committee in order to get that done. Councilmember Kelly.
It seems to me, though, whether it's called a referral or not, in essence, it amounts to the same thing. So, for example, to Mary Rosinski's point this evening, I think it's important to acknowledge that items are brought to committees, to council by staff, and they're discussed, and they go to introduction and action the same way a referral would. So I don't see why these should bypass the referral committee. I mean, I think it has the same impact, the same outcome. The outcome's the same whether or not we call it a referral.
Okay, I see it differently. I mean, these are staff to the particular committees, that they are staff to these committees. They know what the flow of the work is. They have direct interaction with the members of that committee. This is their expertise. This is part of what they do as being a City of Evanston employee. Not just to, this is what, it's hard to explain, but this is what their job is, that they should be constantly educating themselves and the committees that they staff on these issues.
But could they not, I would recommend that staff secure a council member sponsorship. Like if there's something that seems really important, like scooters, either put it through a memo. Would somebody consider taking this up? But I think it is important because we're talking about legislating ultimately. So I think it is important that each item go before the referral committee with a sponsorship. But why couldn't we have staff solicit sponsorship by a council member?
Okay, I'm going to call on the folks I have here. Councilmember Ravel.
Well, I do think that the items that staff puts on the agenda, that it really is different from a referral that's being made by a council member. When they put something, when something appears on the agenda, that packet has to be in process like a week before. And I just see this requirement to get a sponsorship or something to be something that would just really add additional time and slow down our ability to move forward with considering a lot of issues. And many of the agenda items that appear on our agenda are basic to city operations. And how do we distinguish between things that are just, kind of normal business and something that would need to be considered a referral? I looked, flipped through just some recent planning and development agendas. I mean, most of that agenda comes from items that have worked their way through the Plan Commission or Zoning Board of Appeals. But we do get items like, just the last meeting, we had the Greenleaf Shared Street pilot proposal. We get vacation rental license issues, grant the referral about accepting an IDA grant. I just think a lot of these things are just moving issues through our city council consideration in a very logical flow, and adding in this need for referrals and things would just slow things down unnecessarily.
Yeah. Councilmember Reed, I would also just like to say a lot of items that the staff brings to us for discussion are for discussion to keep a committee informed of what's going on in that area. So it isn't necessarily something that leads to action, but it's critical that the committee discuss it and understand what that information does to the work of the committee. And that would, to me, that doesn't belong going through a referrals committee. It's the job of the staff to keep the committee informed. Councilmember Reed.
Yes, I agree. I do think it is the job of staff to keep folks informed, but the council is the legislative body and the staff is the executive body and not legislative. Their powers are not legislative. So I believe that to bring something for discussion, that's up to the committee chair. I think we can make it clear that staff can still bring items for discussion. But I think if there is a referral for an ordinance, a resolution, an expenditure of money, why would the elected legislative body have to go through an extra hoop? If we're saying that it's onerous for staff to have to go through this, why is it not the same thing for us, and why should they have a fast lane when the elected council members do not? And to I think we have to ensure that staff is running through the referrals committee as well. I don't think I would have supported what we were doing thus far if staff was not included in the package of the referrals committee.
Councilmember Kelly and then Councilmember Newsma.
So just to respond to Councilmember Ravel, I think also we've seen a lot of time spent in public meetings. For example, staff proposed that we eliminate public notice before the discussion of the sale of public property. So nobody sponsored that, but we took public time to discuss it. And maybe had they realized that nobody really wanted to put their name on it, that this wasn't of interest to council, the public also, that may have bumped another item from the agenda. And we know that that happens a lot, where a representative, a council member wants to move an item forward, but it gets bumped down because the agendas are so loaded. And maybe the same with, all the residents that worked so hard on the issue of the Welsh Ryan Stadium extended permit for commercial use. I mean, that also didn't come up through a council member, and residents took so much time working on that out of their lives to challenge that, yet it didn't originate from any council members, at least at among this 81st council. So I think, on the other hand, so yes, to your point, but also there's a lot of time that also has been lost, also from staff recommendations.
Councilman Newsma.
I first have a question, which is open to anyone who's able to answer it. Who sets the agenda for committees, for standing committees? And what role does the chair of that committee play in setting the agenda for a standing committee?
Well, a number of things, so the standing committee agenda is created by operation, a lot of it is created by operation of the city government. So let's take planning and development. That agenda occurs because the step before that, for instance, there's a development for, on the P&D agenda. Well, what happened before that was the Plan Commission met several times and recommended up or down on that. And before that, that item was before DAPR, one or many more times. And before that, the developer came in and submitted documents to the zoning department.
So a lot of, if I could just cut to the chase, a lot of the agenda is going to be there no matter what.
Yes, I mean, by operation of our government.
And so I guess to clarify my question is, does the committee chair have any discretion as to adding additional items onto that agenda that aren't automatically heading that way because that's the process is
The committee
flowing?
chairs have discretion with respect to discussion items. For instance, if P&D has a lot, is very heavy, and they're they're going to have a lot of people come to comment, there's a significant amount, the P&D chair can say, let's not have that item for discussion tonight because we won't ever get to it. The P&D chair can, if for instance, I'm using P&D because that's when we frequently have very long meetings, the P&D chair would discuss with the staff, let's not have two big developments on the same night because you won't be able to give proper attention to both. So with the extent of managing, and other council members can discuss it, with the extent of managing the time of what happens, and still being aware of timeliness with respect to items, there are sometimes you just have to have a long meeting because there are a number of things that must happen, contracts that need to be renewed. But generally, the staff brings things to, if it's a contract renewal or a lease renewal on software or something like that, the staff brings it to that particular committee with a big buffer zone, aware that that it could get bumped because of something else taking extra long. So
There are also times where the chair does not put your item on the committee. I have been the recipient of that behavior several times.
I'm
where
sorry,
you,
I couldn't hear you.
So there's also times when the chair does not put your item on the committee agenda, right? I've been the recipient of that several times where I've made a referral or made an ask of something to go on a committee and I'm not the chair and it does not ever make it.
But now we have our referrals
But
committee,
now we have our
which
referrals
addresses
committee,
that
right?
question.
Right, but the
question
staff
on the
items,
table now is staff items.
but the staff items have made it to the agenda, but the council's items have not made it to the agenda.
Right. So I guess the question is, does the committee chair have any authority to set the agenda? And does the city staff have the authority to put stuff on a standing committee agenda
No.
without approval of that committee's chair?
No.
So there's
I beg to differ that.
That's never happened on any committee where I've served as chair.
Okay, it's happened on committees where I've been chair.
Okay, that has not happened to me.
And
So-
this is the.
And this is the rub.
This
Yeah.
is the rub, I
Okay.
suppose.
Yeah.
So I would say that I don't want to have items that the staff are bringing to a committee for discussion to have to go through a reference.
I understand, I have my light on for a comment regarding that.
Okay, go ahead, Councilmember.
So people have made the comments that I have, but if we are elected by the people to bring forward the issues of the people, I don't know why our issues need to be in I think our issues should be in a structured way that they make sense in a referral process and all that, but then the staff can circumvent that. Obviously, we have bills to pay. We're always going to have things that are immediate that are not going to come through a referral committee because they're just things we do and they're just the business of the city. And I don't think the referrals committee or anyone else is going to object to that because it didn't go through that, right? But there are times where, we have these time limitations on our own conversation, but there are times where I sit through a 20-slide staff presentation with no time limitation. So I think if we are being honest, my experience here has not always been in fairness, right? It has been in, staff sometimes get to do things that I don't get to do. Are you raising your hand, Nicholas? So I just think, I don't think we have to have everything that is the business of the city to go through this referrals committee, because you're right, it's not a referral. But there are times where staff do have an idea about whatever it is, and I think that that should go through this committee so that it is put on an agenda, particularly if we want trying to, watch for time and make sure people have, adequate time for discussion and all that, that it should go on the committee, or else you might have this referral committee that's sending things through and trying to be very streamlined and conscious and give everyone enough space for conversation. And you look up and the city manager or the mayor or whoever else it is says, well, I have these 20 staff presentations I want to bring forward. Therefore, the things that the council has brought forward needs to wait until next week. That said, in this committee here, which I'm not saying is the case, but I have 2 items that have now been on this agenda for 3 meetings, right? And
Right.
that happens because of timeliness, but I think if there is not a system how things work, everyone's things work, we will always be in a space where we leave a lot of room for, I'll say favoritism for lack of a better word. And so I think the city manager knows the business items. We all will kind of get the flow of the business items. But if there are other items that staff thinks are so fabulous and they need to have time, I don't know why the city manager or the, knowing that the city manager report, how it always has things on there, would say, hey, here is my request for the next month of these things that need to go on.
Thank you, Councilmember Fleming. Given the clarification that we've just had in this discussion, because I interpreted staff references as much, much broader than I think the discussion has indicated that it would be, I withdraw my motion.
I think that the committee, again, this first committee can lay that out in the guidelines, bills and all that stuff, buying cars. I mean, I don't think anyone's looking for those kind of things to come through, right? But the committee can make those guidelines. Sorry, Nicholas, I'm going to call on you.
And that's fine. And I think that's the discussion I wanted to have, because this language wasn't clear to me. But with we've now just created legislative history that anyone can look up and see what our discussion was. And the referrals committee can now revisit the meeting and find out what you and I discussed and fold it into the guidelines. So I am withdrawing my motion.
Chair Nguyen, I just wanted to point out, as staff who has the responsibility for some of these things getting done, that staff referrals are things like the ordinance that was put forward at the last city council meeting to amend the hotel tax, so we can actually make sure that it gets collected properly. There was an amendment amending the city code regarding municipal solid waste. These are things that, generally speaking, the staff is looking out for, because we actually have to deal with the city code and the regulations of the city that council members might not, because you're dealing with your constituents. So that would be an example, or examples of what staff referrals tend to be.
And I think
the
But
parking.
Mr. Cummings, I think that is the business of the city, that we would expect you to say, hey, you guys need to do this by October 1st. And it would, it would be done. We're not looking for a 5-page memo. And I mean, it would be right. I think what I'm speaking of, and I could be wrong, are these things where that are not these code changes, these legal. We're not going to tell you, hey, you got to get in queue if John Doe is suing us, and we, like court's coming up in July. We're not going to say you got to get in the queue and you're in August.
I was going to bring up
the
the parking, some of the parking pilots as well, were staff initiated referrals about, where we're going to have parking for a particular period of time, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I just wanted to give those examples to the committee for your consideration while you're in the midst of this discussion.
Well, I thank you. That's helpful. And I think that the referrals committee will now figure out how to prioritize these things and make sure the operation of the city still happens in a timely way, that we pay our bills, that we never fall out of compliance with state law. And that to me that satisfies that to me. And as long as staff can bring forward items for discussion at the committees, that is critical to me as well, because that is not always something that becomes legislation, but it's part of our general knowledge on the committee.
They can bring them, but I think they would go through the process, because we don't want the agendas to be super long, right?
If it's a discussion item, then it automatically is at the bottom.
Right, yeah. But just because the staff might not know what else is in the queue, right? And so that's why it's important for everything to go, yes.
Okay. All right. Let's see. I have 2 more lights, but I do think I'm mindful of the time. We've been here 2 hours, everyone, and I don't think everyone wants to stay till midnight tonight. I don't. So I'll just ask Councilmember Reed and Councilmember Kelly, given the fact that I've withdrawn my motion, do you still want to speak to this issue?
I don't want to speak to this issue, but I want to speak to 9.103.
Okay, go ahead. Or wait, Alderman, Councilmember Kelly, did you want to speak to this?
Quick
issue?
question. So given that all the, items of the city functioning, the business items would not go through the referral committee, but other items, such as those that I mentioned, is there any reason that staff shouldn't consider council member sponsorship out of respect to the residents, so that we know that there is a representative up here that stands behind other items that would go through a referral committee?
I'm not sure what you're talking about. I mean, what would be something that's not
for example, I'll go back to the Welsh Rhine. I don't know whether the vote was 9-0 or 8-1 to extend Northwestern's pilot.
If I can clarify, that was a motion made by Alderman Wilson on the floor.
Okay,
so that an example, as Nick gave, an example that Council Cummings gave, such as parking rates, or changing in parking, or Nick, can you throw out one of the examples you gave that staff?
The hotel tax amendment.
The hotel tax, right? Great. Hotel tax amendment, for example, that is a tax that affects the public business of our city, and so, or even the bills list. I mean, maybe the committee chair of the finance committee or whatever committee is dealing with overseeing expenditure should sponsor those things on a regular basis to ensure that every expenditure has, is clearly understood by a council member and has, the legislative body's stamp on it before it even appears on an agenda.
Yeah. I do want us to move along because I do think this is the executive function of the city manager.
Yes.
These are things that all of us would agree on. They need to come to the council. They don't need a council member to sponsor them. These are things that need to be addressed because of the function of the state law, the federal law, contracts that are coming up. I think the referrals committee understands that. I do not think we need to have a council member be attached to every single item.
What if the referral committee were to, say, for example, the elimination of public notice for the selling of public property? So that came up. What if they were to review that and say, please get a sponsor?
No, but
again, to clarify.
Can I do the point of clarification?
Yes.
And maybe it may help, because I think this is a really helpful discussion. So, and this is just me speaking, our role as city council is like high-level forward-thinking strategy. And it's unfortunate that we didn't participate and hear more at our city council. We are getting way into the weeds of our operations, and that's not our role and function. We're a city manager-led city, and I understand and I appreciate, I feel like the point of creating this referral committee is strictly to deal with our ideation and our ideas. I want to make sure, and I'm asking just as Madam Chair, we're keeping the function of what our city staff does on a daily basis. I don't want to get into the weeds of that, nor do I want that managed by council members. That's what we pay a city manager for. So,
but you have to vote on it.
Hold on. Council, I have Ms. Ganderski here who needs to make a comment.
All right, good evening, members of City Council. I have to say, as part of the city manager's office, if the council gets into the business of the executive function, which is the management, control, and order of the city in terms of paying bills, in terms of ensuring that we're in compliance with tax regulations, in terms of compliance with state law, I think that's usurping the executive function of the city manager, which is outlined not only by state code, but by city ordinance. And I think we're getting into some constitutionally gray areas here in terms of what this body is supposed to be doing. The city manager's office has to be able to conduct the business of the city and run the city efficiently, and to put everything through a sponsorship of a council member for the bills list, for instance, is not efficient, and also is probably usurping the role of the city manager's office, would be my opinion.
Okay. I have Councilmember Reed and then Councilmember Kelly, and then I think we have discussed this
Sure.
to the point where I think everyone knows everyone else's views on this, and I think we need to move on.
Certainly. I just do want to note that, again, the council's function is legislative. We have to approve the bills, and if we have to approve the bills or we have to approve the expenditures, ultimately, that's not the executive function. The executive function is, yes, the day-to-day operations, but if it was the city manager's realm completely and law was on, that the city manager had complete control over that, then we wouldn't be voting on those items. And we would.
But getting the bills on the city council agenda is the function of the city manager's office to make sure our bills are paid according to the Prompt Payment Act. So, yes, city council reviews the bills to ensure compliance with good governance and that, you're seeing where the budget's going and that your constituents understand how the money's being spent. But we have to get those bills on the agenda to be paid.
And the council can vote not to pay them, as has been done.
Councilmember Reed, please.
I thought I still had the floor. Just she was responding to my question. Okay. Apologies.
Councilmember Kelly, I think we've covered this issue, and I would really like us to move on because we do have a number of other things.
I wasn't referring to bills, paying bills. I was referring to other items that sometimes are legislative matters, that if there is a way to determine, which of those really belong in the hands of the representatives.
I think we leave that to the Referrals Committee to determine. Okay. Mr. Cummings, did you have something you needed to say?
I was just going to speak to Councilmember Kelly's concern, and I certainly understand it. So her example that she gave about eliminating public notice was more so about trying to clarify the code as to when that notice is given. And that, again, was staff-driven because when we're trying to provide notice, we don't know when we were supposed to put out the notice because the code is not clear.
Right.
So I just wanted to.
There are many times when the staff has come to us to say they have found an inconsistency in our code. And that's the legal department's role, that's all of our staff's role to figure out if there is inconsistency in our code and to bring it forward. If one of us finds that, we bring it forward as well. But generally, it's the city staff that finds that. So I'm trying to figure out where we are now on 9.10.3.
You withdrew your motion, so it's as it stands.
Okay. So, yes, Councilmember. I think we voted on that already. Okay. But now I have Councilmember Revelle.
I didn't hear Alderman Newsom's comment.
I'm sorry.
The motion on the table is 9.10.3 as written with the exception of the last line. We struck those 6 words. 1, 2, 3.
We voted on that. Yeah, we've already voted on that. Yes, Councilmember Revelle.
Well, if we look at the current rules before being amended, there was two sentences in there that talked about referrals to committees, boards, and commissions. Because right now what we've got in front of us is referrals to the city council's standing committees. So we've dropped the language that talks about references to other committees, boards, or commissions which are approved by the council shall be considered by that committee, board, or commission. Prior to approval of such reference, the council shall have the right to debate the motion for such references. Because we do, as aldermen, as council members, make referrals to the plan commission, for example. So I don't know if that language got kind of dropped unintentionally or
from 10.1.3 or 10.3.
It's part of the current. If you look at the pre-amended version of 9.10.3 or of the referral section, it had that portion in it as well.
Oh, and that is an important portion. So do you have the page in the packet where the original is still there?
It's for some reason
Mr.
it's
Cummings?
not there. I'm trying to look for it.
Thank you for catching that, Councilmember Revelle.
But I think, and I can't speak to this, it's on page 137 of the new packet is the old language. And I think the reason why that language was taken out is because the way that the old language was written, city council can make direct references. And now with the references committee, that's been taken away. Those references all go to the references committee.
So is it clear that the referrals committee is also dealing with referrals to the plan commission and those other bodies?
So the way the language in 9.7 was written is that they have to be referred to a board, committee, commission, or the city council. Referrals that come to the referrals committee
Okay.
have to go to the proper venue, as Councilmember Burns
Oh,
said.
okay, I just, as long as we're intentionally making that change.
All right, does that satisfy your question? Thank you, Councilmember Ravel. Councilmember Kelly?
Yeah, I apologize for talking more about this, but, so I think a little more clarity on a reference, on a referral, just in terms that is, only comes from the person making the referral, correct? It doesn't go to staff for any work, a referral comes directly from the person making the referral, correct? Okay.
Okay, all right. All right, so now we're looking again at 9.10.3. So now we are back to approving the entire change that's here. Is that correct? Yes. Ms. Francelno, would you call the roll on 9.10.3? Oh, did you give it to? Oh, sorry.
Councilmember Kelly.
Aye.
Councilmember Braithwaite. Aye. Councilmember Wynn.
Aye.
Councilmember Nusma.
Aye.
Councilmember Burns.
Aye.
Councilmember Sufferton. Councilmember Ravel.
Aye.
Councilmember Reed.
Aye.
Councilmember Fleming. Mayor Biss.
Aye.
All right.
10-0.
The motion carries. So as I scroll through here, the next item that we need to address is it?
911, 3.3.
Yeah, 9.11.3.3. This is adding additional language. I'm sorry, was that you, Peter? So this is adding, if you look at it, it's adding additional language that I'll read it into the record that explains the definition of financial expertise shall mean individuals who have held senior finance positions for at least 5 years in large, equal to or greater in size than the city, private or public organizations, or have consulted and or published in the field of public finance. Okay, so let's see. Oh, shoot. Councilmember Kelly and then Councilmember Nusma.
Move that.
All right. Is there a second for that language adding?
I second.
All right. Okay, so now we're open for discussion. Councilmember Kelly?
Sorry, I'll pass.
Okay. Councilmember Nusma?
I just want to clarify whether or not we have already approved the preceding language drafted or appearing as 9.11.3.3. I'm sorry, I'll even go back to 9.11.3.1, the Finance and Budget Committee. Have we already approved Finance and Budget Committee? I don't recall having done so. My recollection may be faulty.
My understanding is, well, that's a very good question. Mayor Biss, did you have?
Yeah, and I just want to flag that my understanding is that Councilmember Nusma's point is actually, could be broadened out significantly, that a number of the changes in this document are not rendered as red lines, including stuff in Section 2, stuff in Section 5, and so forth. And so this is probably the worst possible time to bring this up because Mr. Cummings is not in the room. But I think there's a lot of stuff that we want to be voting on tonight that we're not going to get to if we're just scanning for redlined text.
All right. Do you have a list? Because I don't have a list of everything that's been changed in this, that is now here, that was not here before.
So on June 7th, this body determined that it wanted to have a Budget and Finance Committee.
Mm-hmm.
The language that was proposed was given by Councilmember Fleming. That language was debated. It is now here in 9.11.3.1. Although that is not contained as a red line, but this was the information that was discussed on June 7th. So it is in here sort of as sort of final. But if the committee decides that it doesn't want this language, that's perfectly fine. But I do have a list of the changes.
Okay. All right. Mayor Biss, did you want to say something? Nope. Okay.
Then I will, if I still have the floor.
Yes, go ahead.
And my understanding then is that 911.3.1 exists as it's written in front of us. I do have a comment on the red line in front of us, the financial expertise shall mean an individual section. I feel that that is perhaps too specific, and in light of our desire to emphasize equity, I would like to give the mayor some more latitude in appointing community members to that position without being so specific about what the requirements are. So I would move to strike this language or not accept it.
I'm willing to second it if we just allow the mayor to appoint one other member, or one of the members can not fit this criteria. I think it's important that some of the members fit this criteria, but, the mayor can have the latitude to appoint someone who does not.
So just to point out, to Councilmember Newsom's point, 9.11.3.3 identifies 3 residents with financial expertise. So I asked
For the definition of financial expertise.
Correct.
Yes.
And so
Right.
that's what the suggestion was. We're open to more suggestions, but if you want to limit who should have the financial expertise, you need to amend the sentence before it that talks about the 3 residents. So to Councilmember Reed's point, if it's only 1 member, if it's 2 members, right now the way it's read or written is all 3 need to have some sort of financial expertise.
I'm comfortable not defining financial expertise, leaving that to the discretion of the mayor.
I'm not. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Councilmember Braithwaite. Yeah.
Thank you, Alderman. And I was trying to,
There's no motion on the floor right now.
I think we're still in discussion over,
But we haven't moved it to discuss it, I think is what he's saying.
So I'll second Alderman Newsom's motion so we can discuss it.
Thank you.
Well, we had already, I think the language is already on the floor.
yeah.
Right.
I stepped out, but was there a motion?
There was a motion to scratch financial expertise, correct, Mr.
Correct.
Newsom?
Right, but is that the only motion? Was there never
I
a motion
thought I
about
read-
9, 10, 11? Okay, got you.
All right. Lost track.
Yeah, I guess-
I'm suggesting we scrap that, the red line section here. Alderman Braithwaite, Councilmember Braithwaite has a different opinion.
Well, it's just clarification. I mean, for me, it's almost like we're creating inefficiency here because I see and I understand that AP&W does something very similar. And so I'm trying to understand, and I'll use the example that I've heard, whoever authored this can speak up. Jamie Pett Collier's name has been mentioned several times throughout this discussion. And so I find her insight, valuable in terms of how she, looks at the lens. If our staff looks at it horizontal, she'll look vertical. And for whomever is going to serve on this committee, if we're going to take advice from residents as it pertains to the budget, I would hope that there would be some component of finance, a part of this committee, should I or any one of us land on it. And so, and maybe Ms. Gandersky, you can help me to understand. So we have analysts, and I'll just name the names, Hitesh and other people in this department. What type of accounting? Are there different accounting standards that they're specifically trained in as it relates to municipal budgets versus the average outside person coming into this discussion? Because again, if I saw value in it and if I wanted to be on this committee, I want to make sure it's like clearly defined who is in it. So if you're coming on MWEBE, if you don't give a damn about business, it's probably not the right committee. If you're going on the environmental board, if you don't care and study environmental issues, you probably should not be on the environmental committee because that's going to be a waste of time, and you know what happens downstream. So help me to understand like how our staff is trained in terms of financially and their approach to municipal, and then maybe I can be more informed when we're talking about financial expertise as it relates to this new committee. Does that make sense? Okay, thank you.
Sure. I'm not a CPA. I'm not going to pretend to be one, but
Sure.
my understanding on a high level is that our CFO is a CPA who has a specific training in government accounting. Kate Lewis-Lakin is also a budget management analyst, and then we have Tashik Kerr, who's a management analyst as well. Their specific backgrounds are in government finance, and that entails, bond debts, that entails tax levies, that entails many things that a regular or a business CPA may not have to consider in terms of, an S corp or an LLC type of a structure. So there's a special familiarity, and there's different types of budget practicing. There's zero-based budgeting. There's different formulas and different methods that our finance department would look at in terms of preparing the budget. So at a high level, I hope that explains.
It does, and maybe this is where the mayor will ask him to come back in to define it. I just think if you're going to make a brand new committee that, from my perspective, duplicates the role of administrative and public works, that we should at least put individuals who are going to serve with 5 aldermen, similar to the weight that economic development carries, that you want someone with expertise to the same level that you would want someone with expertise on the environmental board or utilities board. Is just my thought and advice for whatever that's worth.
And I'll just bring in some of my past history again on the council. A number of years ago, when we were facing a significant decision about our pensions, there were several very, very different suggestions that were being floated in front of the council on how to address our serious pension problem. At that point, it was Mayor Tisdall who was the mayor. She appointed a blue ribbon task force to study the issue of municipal pensions in Illinois and come back to us with their recommendations. That blue ribbon panel was astonishing. I mean, the people who were here in Evanston, and that we ultimately made a very smart, well-advised decision because of them.
To clarify my point here, I'm not suggesting we appoint, financial neophytes to this committee. Indeed, we should appoint financial experts to this committee. I just don't think we need to define it quite so prescriptively. And my perspective here is informed by my experience on the Utilities Commission, where there is, by city code, language that suggests that applicants to serve on the Utilities Commission should be an engineer or have some background in the business. But it also says it's not explicitly required. So a citizen with an interest in that, even though they haven't worked in that or they might not have a degree in that area, is allowed to participate in the Utilities Commission. Ultimately, it's up to the mayor to make that appointment, the city council to ratify those appointments. So in the interest of trying to diversify the representation of the city's Utilities Commission, I wanted to make sure that the Utilities Commission was not all white guys, which was the funnel that was leading to the Utilities Commission, because that, unfortunately, is what you get when you're asking for engineers. And so in an effort to cast a wider net and diversify, at least on the Utilities Commission, I wanted to not be quite so prescriptive in who we were asking to participate here. Ultimately, it's up to the mayor to make that appointment. I'm comfortable with the mayor making the call on who has sufficient financial expertise to participate.
Okay. Councilmember Reed and then Councilmember Kelly.
Yeah, I will just say I seconded this motion. I think it is important that we have some public members with financial expertise. I think those members could come from any community, but I do think that our budget, the reason I seconded this is because our budget isn't just a cold black and white, or I'm sorry, black and red document, or black and white document, that, it's a moral document as well. And so I think it's important that we have representatives who not only bring the, kind of cold financial aspect to it, but also the moral aspect to the document to review everything we're doing. So that's why I seconded this. I would hope that we would amend this to, either use this as a guideline or to say that that 2 of the residents follow this guideline and 1 maybe doesn't, but whatever the council decides to do, I'm open to making this more equitable.
What is the current motion on the floor?
The current motion on the floor is to strike the red line defining financial expertise.
All right. Councilmember Kelly.
So I think we absolutely have to require financial expertise from our resident members, because we will have the aldermen will be participating on this as representatives of the community, and that we should be learning from financial experts, and no less.
And what I'm suggesting does not change that requirement.
And the other suggestion that I made to the committee is that currently the way that 9.11.3.3 is drafted, all 3 residents that are appointed have to have financial expertise. So even if you get rid of this definition, there's still going to need to be some financial expertise on the committee.
And then it's up to the mayor.
Correct.
Okay.
And the mayor can make it a judgment if a person has 4.5 years at an organization that is slightly smaller in size than the city of Evanston. I would be fine having that person participate.
All right. So there's, the motion on the floor is to strike this, excuse me. Councilmember Flynn.
That's okay. I just would, because, I feel like we're getting way down into the weeds, but in our other boards and commissions, I think like a mental health board, which is very different, but there was this experience with X, Y, and Z, and, there was some guidelines, but it wasn't so clear cut. I appreciate that we are trying to be very clear cut, but again, if you have somebody who's held a senior finance position, what if they've held a junior finance position? They still might bring some value to the table, or if they've been somewhere 3 years versus 5 years, so, and then the idea of publishing a field of public finance, while I appreciate that, I read enough publications to know everyone who publishes is not necessarily an expert. And so, I think to Alderman Braithwaite's point, we want to have someone who has some expertise, but I think expertise down to this really fine detail might be too much and might discourage people. We keep talking about bringing new people to the table. We might have some young people in town who have recently become CPAs who would have value, but they might not meet this criteria.
All right. I just want to say we have a motion on the floor. It's been seconded. We've had our discussion. Is everyone comfortable voting now? Councilmember Kelly, you turn on your light again?
Can I amend the amendment?
Sure. Yeah.
Can I amend the amendment to strike the word senior, change 5 years to 2 years, period? And leave it at that and strike the rest, so that we do ensure financial expertise. I don't want to strike the entire idea of having financial expertise, but to reduce it to financial expertise shall mean individuals who have held finance positions for at least 2 years.
And then period?
And then period.
Is there a
I would second that.
Okay. All right, so
Be
let's
clear,
take
that was a substitute motion or
That was
whatever's appropriate.
it was an amendment.
okay.
All right. So, Ms. Frantantoni, would you call the roll?
Councilmember Kelly.
Councilmember
Are
Kelly?
we voting, if this passes, are we done with 9.11?
No, since it's not a substitution, we go back to,
So we're voting on an amendment then.
Yes.
It was amendment to your motion, which was to strike.
Right.
And so it might be more in order to be a substitute motion, which I think was Councilmember Reed's point.
Councilmember Kelly, would you change your motion to?
I would prefer it to be an amendment. So if this doesn't pass, then we could vote on striking the entire thing.
Okay. So it will remain as an amendment. Ms. Frantantoni, would you call the roll?
Councilmember Kelly.
1 second.
it's up to Councilmember.
I believe Councilmember Braithwaite wants to amend the amended
Sure,
amendment.
so I think we're actually coming to agreement. If
Could you turn
I
your?
think we should leave the finance expertise should be there. Individuals should have finance positions, and then that's it. And the mayor can decide whatever that year is.
Okay.
And we just get rid of the year. Does that make everyone?
So can you, yes.
Okay,
can
I'm
you read
sorry.
it?
Financial expertise stays. Shall means individual who have held finance positions, period.
Period.
Equal to, greater in size than the city. That's it. Private or public organizations, or have consulted and published in the field of public finance.
That kind of goes back to.
What if they were the
Wait,
CFO of a $200 million organization?
It doesn't matter. It's the mayor's choice. But we're just,
Wait, Peter, I'm
sorry.
confused. Councilmember Braithwaite.
Sure. Everything stays the same. We're only getting rid of the word senior
Go ahead.
and the number of years. So it just says have finance positions. That's it. So we got rid of the number. Instead of arguing over 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, 4 year, 5 years, it's just equal to or greater than the size of the city. Does that make sense?
Well, I had struck that part too.
Oh, you did strike that part.
Want that-
I think that we're now going
So,
down. his path,
Claire's-
which is
No, I
going
think,
to-
no, because he would have struck everything. I'm saying we need to leave financial expertise in there. I just reduced it to make it
But
broader.
financial expertise is
Wait.
in there,
Right.
in the preceding line. 3 residents of Evanston with financial expertise shall serve 2 years with the option to extend as needed.
Right, so this paragraph, Councilmember Kelly, was what I had reached out to you and Councilmember Fleming and Councilmember Nguyen to define what financial expertise was.
And that's why I asked the question.
And so he's suggesting to leave it vague. There's some discussion about that. You're suggesting that we narrow it down. So the amendment on the floor is, unless Councilmember Braithwaite is going to amend that, is to have financial expertise shall mean individuals who have held finance positions for at least 2 years, period.
I do think we need to have some definition to financial
That could be the
expertise.
floor and not the ceiling. So I will withdraw.
Okay.
To keep us
So
moving forward.
we now have Councilmember Kelly's amendment to Councilmember Nusma's motion. So Ms. Francelno, would you call the roll?
Yeah, totally great.
So we're voting on the amendment. If the amendment
Yes.
fails, we still have my motion.
That's correct. Mhm.
Ready? Councilmember Kelly?
Aye.
Councilmember Braithwaite?
Aye.
Councilmember Nguyen?
Aye.
Councilmember Nusma?
No.
Councilmember Burns?
No.
Councilmember Sufferton? Councilmember Ravel?
Aye.
Councilmember Reed?
No.
Councilmember Fleming? Mayor Biss?
No.
That's 4 noes.
Good.
So the motion carries. All right. Okay, now, so now we have to vote on the whole thing. We do, even though, okay, all right, we'll have to vote on the entire 9.11.3.3. This is the most complicated rules committee that any city staff member has ever had to follow and take minutes on.
Just, we're thorough, we're not complicated, we're just thorough.
Councilmember Kelly?
Aye.
Councilmember Braithwaite?
Aye.
Councilmember Nguyen?
Aye.
Councilmember Nusma?
Aye.
Councilmember Burns?
Aye.
Councilmember Sufferton? Councilmember Ravel?
Aye.
Councilmember Reed?
Aye.
Councilmember Fleming? Mayor Biss?
Aye.
Okay, it carries 10-0.
Okay.
Point of clarification.
Did we just vote on 9,
No,
3.1 also?
we voted on 9.11.3.3.
Okay, not 3.1.
No, we have not voted.
That was previously voted on.
But
3.1 and 3.2
No, we
were
didn't.
discussed
Okay.
June 7th. And the committee as a consensus, this was what was discussed on June 7th.
Right. So, Mayor Biss, but I think we need a little clarification here, because, Mayor Biss, go ahead, and then I'll follow you.
So we have to decide if we're comfortable taking an up or down vote on all the things that are in this section of the packet that are not yet in the rules, but that are not redlined either, because Mr. Cummings included them in the packet because we all agreed on them without voting last time.
Yes.
And that would
is
include 9.11.3.1 and 9.11.3.2 and a bunch of other stuff too. I think we all agree on all that stuff. We got to actually do that if we wanted to, yeah.
So it's actually all of 9.11.3. After special committees, it defines finance and budget, and everything under that is what's new. So 3.1, 3.2, 3.3, 3.4 are all new.
Okay. Can I motion that we strike bills from 9.11, 3.1, because that goes with AP and W?
Well, hold on one second. Look, we need to discuss this larger issue, though, that the mayor has raised. So, because we discussed and agreed, but not, we voted on some things at the last, actually, we did not vote on anything at the last meeting. So, to be consistent with this meeting, then we would need to go back to that meeting and look at the red line from that and approve all of that. Unless we want to take a break. And
I
have
thought
your-
we talked about moving all of this almost like a consent agenda, everything that we agreed on at the last meeting. And then this meeting was only to go over the new red line items. I thought I missed that first vote because I was late. I assumed we moved everything already.
And that was our discussion. Our discussion was we would put it all on the next meeting, this, which now is this meeting.
Right.
And that we would approve it at this meeting, because we had a number of other things to do.
Right.
And that was staff's understanding?
That
which
was
is why
my
it's written this way.
Okay.
So can we make that can I move that we approve everything prior to, what did you say, 9.11?
Well, I wonder if we should just continue on where we are and then.
And then approve everything as written.
Yeah.
I guess we could do that.
I'm sorry, one at a time.
I'm sorry, so I was going to move that we approved everything that was verbally approved last week, but to Councilmember Reed's point, maybe because we're almost done with the red line, can we finish the last red line and then just approve the whole thing as written and as amended tonight?
Yeah, Mayor Biss,
And
you
just
had
have one
your
vote?
light on. Let me get, I think Mayor Biss is about to respond.
No, I was going to make the same motion that Councilmember Fleming was going to make and then decided not to make. I don't care about the order either. I just think we should
Yes.
pick a.
Well, no,
Yeah.
that's my understanding of what we're going to do, too. I thought you wanted us to go back and go point by point.
Oh, I have no need for that at all. I just
Okay.
want to make sure everyone knows what they're voting on so that no one feels confused after the fact.
Yes, okay, thank you. Thank you. Councilmember Fleming, did you want to continue now that you've heard?
No, I'm fine, just keep going, and then at the end, just approve everything, and then we can go home by midnight.
So,
Point of order,
Yes.
Chair. Councilmember Kelly did make a motion to strike the word bills from 9/11/3-1, but there was not a second yet. I think the.
Second.
that's right. I held her off because I wanted to just finish this other thing, so sorry about that. I'm trying to keep track of the threads. So, yes, so now we have a motion and a second to strike bills from
11.3.1.
Okay, 9.11.3.1.
Yes.
All right, would you please take the roll, Ms. Francelno?
Councilmember Kelly.
Aye.
Councilmember Braithwaite.
Aye.
Councilmember Wynn.
Aye.
Councilmember Nusma.
Aye.
Councilmember Burns.
Aye.
Councilmember Sufferton.
Aye.
Councilmember Ravel.
Aye.
Councilmember Reed.
Aye.
Councilmember Fleming. Mayor Biss.
Aye.
Anybody need a bio break?
Okay.
So at this point, that completes our red line as far as I can tell.
No, there's more.
There's more? All right.
And I have my
What is
light
the
on.
number?
It's 18 point, yeah.
I'm sorry.
18.13.
So has there been a vote on the rest of this section that we were just talking about?
Not yet.
Okay.
Yes.
And- Chair, I apologize, I'm seeking recognition.
Yes, yes. Go ahead, Councilmember Reed.
Thank you. I just want, I hope we can do this quickly. There's an item, a rule amendment that I've had on the rules agenda for a couple of meetings as well that did not, for some reason, make it into these red lines, which was to change Rule 18.11 to only allow council members and a vote of the council to place an item on the agenda as a special order of business.
So if I can respond to that, Councilmember Reed, that was a separate agenda item on the last agenda. And so it was meant, my understanding, at least when I went through these red lines, was that it would be taken up with another amendment that was also separate on the July meeting.
But was the references committee, was this even in that agenda then? Wasn't this?
The references came up at June 7th to be added to the rule book. I asked specifically if we would include the two references that you made that were on the agenda, and the committee, the direction the staff was given at that time was no, and that 1811, and there was one other one, I can't remember what it is right now.
11 and 12.
And that would be taken up at the next meeting in July, when we held everything over, all the items, R2, R3, R4, et cetera, et cetera. So the only thing that was carried to this meeting was the rule book, and then all of those other items were going to be on the agenda in July.
Yeah, I understand. I would like to ask for clarification from the chair, which, again, poor timing, why those items were not, why was there a bifurcation of those items? Why were my amendments to the rules not included in this packet and the other ones were?
She's not around.
Can I make a suggestion that you hold your comments?
Thank you for the
Councilman
suggestion, but
Reed, and then
I
we
have a question.
I mean, it's
So in complete honesty, the entire agenda that did not get decided was held over until July. This meeting was called to try and get through the rule book, and then we would address those other things separately. That's the only reason why I can explain to you in terms of as a staff person who was.
Yeah, no, and I don't expect you to explain that because it wasn't your decision, but, it wasn't Mayor Biss's, but I'll go
But it
ahead
was
and hear
an
from
agenda
you.
item on the agenda that was literally held over to July. So it's still in our queue for July.
Yeah, but it's a rule change, just you think that.
I specifically asked that question on June 7th and was told that we would hold it over to July.
I mean, I'm just a bystander here, but my understanding of what happened was that referrals to the Rules Committee became separate agenda items, and then separately, an agenda item was sort of created by acclamation, which is, hey, let's go through the rules. So then when we got to June 7th, there was like the Councilmember Reed referral agenda item separate from the just let's go through the rules general discussion, and all the agenda items besides let's go through the rules wound up getting tabled.
So, okay, well then if we're just going through the rules, then I'd like to bring up that item. If we're just generally discussing the rules and we can bring up anything, then I'm going to go ahead and bring it up.
But it's already an agenda item for the July meeting.
But if
So
we're, just.
Can I just make a suggestion, since I don't have it written in front of me or anyone else? It's not, it makes it difficult, Councilmember Reed, to incorporate it. So if you would like to circulate it, I didn't have the benefit of seeing it, send it all to our email addresses, and then we know that it's been calendared for the July meeting. Fair enough?
I will say that I did that and it was on the last agenda.
I
I think that if we're having a general rules discussion, it would have made sense to incorporate rules changes that council members made. So I'll rest there. Thank you.
I understand it. And then at this hour, 10 minutes to 9, I think if we had it in front of us, we know that we'll be.
No, I hear you. I'm saying we should have had it in front of us, is what I'm saying. Thank you.
Understood, understood. Where are we with the agenda? 18.13. All right, we're at 18.13. That's redlined in our agendas. Are there any changes? Seeing no lights, Councilmember Newsma is the first member.
Yeah, I appreciate, thank you, Mayor Biss. I appreciate the intent of this proposal, to elevate the attention that we're paying on this specifically enumerated list of issues. I submit that we should not have to make a special request for this information. And that this information should be provided as a matter of course by staff in the memos going to council, and would propose that we not therefore include section 18.13 as drafted in our notes, in our rules, but put the responsibility on staff to address these issues in their in their memos to council. This also gives us some flexibility, should our priorities change, which I think we expect that they will throughout the process of our strategic plan. So, I will suggest, and if I need to make this as a motion, we do not adopt 18.13.
I'm sorry, was there a motion?
I'll make that a
Did
motion.
make a motion.
I will second
Second.
that motion. Yes.
All right, discussion? Councilmember Reed?
I agree with Councilmember Nusma. I think I could have sworn that this, I'll go back and check the record, but I could have sworn that this was the recommendation of the body at the last meeting, that these were just built into the process. And specifically, I remember discussion that we wouldn't be able to use these notes to hold an item, but then when I look at 18.13, the last paragraph there, it says that, if a note is not fulfilled, the item shall be held until staff is able to fulfill the note. And it seems as though a member could, an item comes up for introduction, someone can request a financial note, and then it's held until that financial note is fulfilled. And then it comes back, and then someone can say, hey, guess what? I want an equity note. And then the equity note appears and it's held. And so I do think, I think Alderman Newsom just said it. If he didn't, he said it in an email earlier, that we can use the normal process, the normal hold process, to allow for more time on an issue, and that requires two council members rather than just one council member unilaterally being able to hold off on an item.
And I just wanted to point out to Councilmember Reed's point, at the time when we were discussing this on June 7th, there was no language because we didn't have language to present in a red line. So that's why it wasn't included with the rest of the changes, and why it is redlined, because now we have language. So I just wanted to point that out, and that's why it wasn't already included, like some of the other changes.
Councilmember Fleming, and then I'm going to call on Ms. Gandersky to speak from a staff perspective as well.
Yeah, so we to Jonathan, Mr. Newsom's point, we used to do this when you pointed on your email for equity or whatever it used to be, and I don't know why that, fell off the radar for the items. I did send everyone earlier today a copy of a financial note that the county uses, and so that is a little bit more elaborate than your proposal of just kind of a few sentences. I'm happy to, support your motion. I do think that, particularly if it's something that is going to be budget intensive or potentially some kind of legal issue, that when people are making referrals, or as maybe even the referral committee is looking at referrals, that they maybe are asking for a more elaborate note if needed, because two sentences are not going to suffice if we're talking about, something really major and it's going to impact our budget. We're going to need it. And I would rather have that in a note form that goes out to the public, that we have time to digest, that we have questions to ask, versus having staff here trying to off the cuff explain something or to sit through a staff presentation. So I'm happy to support your, proposal but I would like to leave the ability to have people either have staff or have, us ask for a more detailed note depending on the matter. Also regarding Councilmember Reed's point, I don't think that you should be able to hold this if the note is not fulfilled, because that might not be that might be a staff issue, or, if staff's out of town or sick or whatever, then the note can't be fulfilled. It might be that we decide as a council we don't have enough information that night to vote on something without, more elaborate note or presentation. But I don't like the idea that if the note's not fulfilled, then we can't, move on the business. Depending on what the business is, obviously. A budget thing is very different. So I'm assuming, Ms. Gandersky, you might, and I'm guessing, you might have some concerns about what this does for staff time in the memos. But before, they were really like 3 sentences. It was not an entire analysis. If I'm asking for something, again, that's a real financial thing, the judicial note might not even apply, and he could just write NA, or, it would not be any additional labor. But I think it could just help us to have a better conversation and not prolong things up here.
Go ahead.
So if I may, from a city manager's perspective, in being here the last year now, I definitely have learned enough from the council to understand what the council is looking for in particular items, especially items that will affect the budget. And it's something that City Manager Storley and Deputy City Manager Richardson and I are really looking at when reviewing staff memos. If there's a way to incorporate the CARP goals, if there's a way to incorporate equity goals, if there's a way to incorporate the budget goals, we're asking staff to do that now. I just want the council to be mindful of time frame, and to Councilmember Reed's point, when staff bring a memo for an agenda item for council, that has to be brought to the administrative staff at least 7 days in advance. And that's a perfectly drafted memo because it takes time for the agenda to be created. And we have to notice that properly. So the more, I guess, requirements you put in, we can fulfill that. It's just the time it might take staff. For instance, I can give you an example. There's an agenda item coming up on Monday where I've had to have 5 different units from 3 different departments put in their piece on it because we wanted to make sure we incorporated enough information for the council to consider the first time. So budget, CARP goals, equity goals, we were looking at all of that, and not to mention, this is involved in engineering analysis, so and a map analysis. So we were looking at all of that, and I think it was touched by 3 different departments, and that took at least 3 weeks to draft. So just giving an example, of course, we want to make sure the council's well informed. But to Councilmember Reed's point, the council does have a mechanism to request more information or hold an item if more information is needed.
Can I reply to that, since that, just for clarification, and I do appreciate, we do have staff, but I feel like sometimes we go very far down what the staff needs, and we are here to represent what the people need, right? And so I think that Jonathan's suggestion, again, looking at, and you weren't out here, Mr. Gandersky, but we used to have an equity line, and it was literally 2 lines. So if they're already putting that in the memo, it's just a place of where they put it, right? They just say equity goal and they write something versus it being in a very long paragraph. And being that I've been here 4 years and reading every memo, some are good and some are just not good. And so I think if we can maybe make a better outline and then staff knows what we're looking for to plug in, obviously there'll be times where we need more information and times when we don't. And I want to respect staff time, but we are not paid to do that job. And so we rely on you all. And so I think, I don't want to discount what my residents need because of staff time. I don't want to burn staff out either. And I think if a memo takes 3 weeks because it's very elaborate, then that's something that through this new process is communicated, and the council member who asked for it just needs to understand it's going to take more time because 3 departments are working on it, and we have to, or whoever is on the referrals committee has to set those expectations and have a lot of communication as well, so that everyone's needs can be met. But I don't want our citizens to think that we're prioritizing staff time more than when we're prioritizing their needs. And so I needed to be clear with that for the residents as I support. So if you're already having staff do that, that's great, and maybe they don't have to even write as much anymore. They just kind of fill in the blank from kind of a different memo. Because the memos used to even be formatted in a kind of a little bit of a different way that was easy for the public to digest. So I think there's a way to get it done, because most of these things probably are not going to apply for every referral that's even made. And then we just know that at least staff has thought about that thing, whether it's judicial or fiscal or whatever.
Councilmember Fleming, are you suggesting we keep 18.13 as drafted, but also request the memos to be formatted as I've suggested?
No, I don't necessarily care about formatting. I just in thinking about the old formatting, it wasn't like the equity, note or the equity line was so elaborate. It was, pretty simple.
Right.
So I don't need to get into how staff need to format the paper necessarily. I do think that having a line or 2 on these things, if they apply to the referral, makes sense. And Mr. Anderson said they're already doing that. And then if the staff or the council feel like they need more information for something, that can be done in a more elaborate fashion. But if she's already having staff think through all of our goals and just kind of writing it on the memo, then that should already fulfill what we're looking for.
And if that process happens optimally, there would be no need for a note process such as this, because we're getting all the information.
Right, unless I'm asking for something that's going to get us in a lawsuit, then I would hope Mr. Cummings would write a more thorough legal note, or I would ask for that. Yeah. And he's not just going to say, potential litigation.
I
He's
would
going
hope,
to be more
I would
thorough.
hope that the city attorney would do that anyway without having to be asked.
Right. Yeah.
And
I need to be clear on my request as well. I can't just make assumptions of what the staff is thinking. I think part of my job is to make sure I'm clear with staff so they're not spinning their wheels, assuming what I need or what I'm looking for.
I feel like we're saying the same thing. I'm not trying to prioritize staff time over council's time or what the residents need. I think we're saying the same thing. The council's point is well taken. You're looking for this information in a way that the public can digest, the way that the council members can digest. And I'm saying on behalf of the city manager's office, we've definitely gotten that message. And it's something that I'm looking at very critically in the memos that are coming through to make sure that all that information is encompassed to the best of our ability.
Okay. So I stepped out for a minute. So Councilmember Newsma, did you
So
move?
I have moved to strike 18.13 as drafted.
Okay. All
And
right.
I believe
So
Councilmember Fleming has seconded that.
Okay.
Councilmember Reed.
All right. Can we call the roll on that?
To propose new language, or are you going to do that second?
I'm not proposing any change to our rules. I'm not sure what the appropriate mechanism for, formalizing
Point of
the
order?
staff memo would be, but I don't think that's through our rules.
All right. Mayor Biss?
18.13 isn't in the rules at this time. So we could just, if the agreement is to move on, we can move on without voting on anything.
Mm-hmm.
Or if someone wants to move 18.13, we could do that. But I think voting to strike it is a little
Moved.
extreme.
It's not there.
Well, I think that just for clarity, I think the only reason it is in order is because we're likely going to, at the end, vote to adopt, the document as it's been presented to us with the amendments, and so we should just clear it out.
So point of order, Madam
Yes,
Chair.
go ahead.
Councilmember Newsma, if you would just want to move to reject the proposal, because right now it's a proposed change, and I think that would just have your same.
I will amend my motion thusly.
Okay. All right. So can we call the roll on that?
Sure.
Councilmember Kelly,
Could you clarify? So are we voting to strike the whole shebang? Yes.
Right, you're
Yes.
voting not to accept it. It's a proposed change. You're voting to reject it.
To reject 18.13?
I'm
I'm sorry.
Just to
I'm
clarify-
struggling with that one. I understand what it is, but I would like some other language in there. I just don't have it in my head.
Right.
What I
So we
like.
can
So-
always come back at a later
Yeah.
point in July. I mean,
I have proposed amendments to 12.1 and 18.11 on the agenda for July. So if you have other language you'd like to propose, get it to my office. We can bring it as a proposal in July.
So right now, we are deciding
Right, yeah.
to reject this language. Now, we might, at the next meeting, come up with some type of policy discussion of what we'd like to see in a staff memo. But right now,
I know. I'm just, my brain's thinking, but
okay,
that's,
all right. So please call the roll.
Councilmember Kelly,
I'm just asking for a little bit more, just a tiny bit more discussion on this, so I can, from Mayor Biss.
All right. Mayor Biss?
Yeah, and I mean, I understand where the concerns are coming from, and I think the questions before us are good questions that I don't have strong feelings about, so I don't have an objection to just supporting Councilmember Newsma's motion. I am with Councilmembers Fleming and Kelly. I think getting our arms around this is important. I think having a mechanism to make sure that we have this information in front of us before it's time to vote is really valuable. I have no pride of authorship over this. I think the question that Councilmember Newsma poses is a good question about whether it should be a special process at all or whether it should be automatic in the memo. I think the question that Councilmember Reed poses of could this be used as a sort of malicious tool to hold stuff up is a good question too. But if we vote yes, and then given the fact that it's 9:05, move on, which I would hope we do if we vote yes, I think it's really worth thinking on our individual bases between now and July 7th about the right way forward on this question to make sure that we're giving ourselves the tools to make decisions with the information we need, and quite frankly, that we're giving the public the tool to show up at the meetings with views that are informed with the information that they need as well.
All right, now can we call the roll?
Yes.
I can't amend can I amend to hold?
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
Councilmember Kelly was asking if we can move to hold this particular proposal. Hold it
I think
over.
that's six of one, half dozen of another. If we don't accept this now, we can
Yeah.
come up with some alternative and consider
Right.
that in July.
Yeah.
Why not go ahead and strike this language and come back with
whatever your
with better
recommendations are.
language?
Yeah.
For our next meeting in July, right?
Or
In 2
future
weeks?
meeting.
July 7th
But
is our next.
I'm ready just to get through the rules before we start the budget. So
July 7th is our next.
July
rules
7th,
committee.
all right. So
Yes. And we will have the whole evening again.
And then some. Oh, 4 years.
For 4 items.
Please. If we end up keeping this,
You know what happens
So be
when
it.
we have that much time?
Yeah.
We just fill it.
Madam Chair, I think there is a vote on the,
Wait, I'm sorry.
I think there is a vote before us. It's been properly moved and
Yes.
seconded.
So, Councilmember Kelly.
Aye.
Councilmember Braithwaite.
Aye.
Councilmember Wynn.
Aye.
Councilmember Newsma.
Aye.
Councilmember Burns.
Aye.
Councilmember Sufferton.
No.
Councilmember Ravel.
Aye.
Councilmember Reed.
Aye.
Councilmember Fleming. Mayor Biss.
Aye.
All right, we're almost through this.
This 18.13
We're down to 19. and
is stricken.
I think we're almost done. Wait, we're
So now,
done.
if we are planning, now we need to approve all of it. All right. And,
I move
oh,
that we
goodness.
approve.
Mayor Biss, then Councilmember Burns, then Councilmember Ravel, then Councilmember Reed. Okay, so Biss, Burns, Ravel, and Reed. Okay.
I move that we accept all the agreements arrived at our last rules meeting as memorialized in this packet in the form of all changes that are not redlined.
Second.
All right, discussion. Now I'll call on Councilmember Burns.
I wanted to make sure I'm clear on what we voted on for 9.7, because Councilmember Newsma, what you sent is not what I thought we voted on. So, Council Cummings, I don't know if you can provide some clarification on that, 9.7.
So the language that I took down for 9.7 to make an amendment should read, "The sole duty of this committee shall be to consider references made by the mayor and alderperson or the city manager, and shall based on a transparent and established set of criteria, refer them to a board, committee, commission, or the city council with instructions as to whether they shall appear on the relevant agenda for discussion, introduction, or action, or with the request of a particular alderperson, introduction and action, pursuant to Rule 20.1.
My email just a few minutes ago did not include all that language. I was referring only to, the point of my email was only to address that particular clause, which was included.
So the rotation information, Council Cummings should have the version that includes the.
I do have rotation information. The first alderperson shall serve for 2 years, and the Rules Committee shall appoint alderpersons annually in accordance with 9.3A. So that's like a separate sentence, but that first sentence that Councilmember Newsma had proposed is what I was reading. But yes, there is additional language concerning about the rotation as well.
Did you get pursuant to 20.1?
Yes, that was the last sentence in the first thing I just read.
Councilmember Burns, did you need more information about that 9.7?
I just would like to, so there was another part in there that was supposed to say and send each referral. So I just sent an amendment. I don't know if I need to do a motion to reconsider, but I sent it to everybody. But if you.
You can just amend it now if you feel. You can amend it.
It was a few different things, yeah, and I sent what I'd like to amend it to, if I can still do that, but I thought we approved it already.
You would need a motion to reconsider and
You
then
don't- I don't
propose a
need-
new language.
yeah.
But the way that it reads currently is shall, based on a transparent and established set of criteria, refer them to a board. So there is clear direction that it has to be referred to a board, committee, or commission, or city council based on the transparent and established set of criteria.
So I have the sole duty of this committee shall be to consider references made by the mayor or an alderperson or the city manager and send each referral to a board, committee, commission, or city council with instructions as to not whether, but when they shall appear on the relevant agenda for discussion, and then everything else is the same.
That's not, I will say, that's not what you presented before, though.
The Cindy's referral is the when, I just caught that, but the Cindy's referral I brought up.
But I may have missed something. But we didn't
So-
have
so
a
the
time,
weather-
a
I'm
time
sorry.
deadline before. Go ahead, Mr. Cummings, yeah.
And I'm only speaking on this because as attorneys, we deal with like where stuff is in a sentence makes a difference. So the whether is actually ratifying if it's going to be on the agenda for discussion, introduction, or action, not whether it's going to be on the agenda at all. It's going to be on the agenda. It's just a matter of if it's going to be for introduction, action, or discussion. So that's what that whether means. So I understand from what I'm hearing from you is your concern is if it's going to appear on the agenda at all.
In your opinion, what section is saying this shall appear on an agenda in the current?
There is no direction to put it on the committee, commission, or board, or even the city council agenda after it's referred. And I think that goes back to my point about priorities that are left in the hands of the mayor and the city manager. But the referrals committee, the way this is currently drafted, does specifically have to give it to a board, committee, or commission with instructions on if it's going to be on there for introduction, action, or discussion.
So,
And that's what I'm saying. Where are you? Shall be. I see shall be based on a I don't even know if that's written right, but it says shall, comma, based, but shall be based on a transparent and established set of criteria. I see that. But where are you saying that it shall be?
There is no direction from this rule to actually place it on the agenda.
Right, and
It's
that's
just
what
referred to that committee, the committee, the commission, or the city council. And in those situations, the chair of each of those standing committees, I'm not really sure about the boards and commissions. They set their own rules, but they determine their own agenda, just like the mayor and the city manager determine the agenda for city council. So there is no direction in this rule to force them on a particular agenda. And if that's what you want, I think there may be other rules you have to consider. That's what I was.
Not force them on a particular agenda, but
Can I get a point of clarification? Because I think you're trying to, there's a problem we're trying to solve. What is the main concern? Because if it isn't covered here, it may be silent in other places. So I think if I hear what you're trying to solve,
if we're saying a chair can block right now under the current rules that a chair can decide whether or not a council member's referral ever makes it to even the point of discussion. If we're saying that that's the way the rules are currently written, that's a yes.
So when it's referred to a committee, the committee chair determines the agenda based upon all the items that feed to that committee. So the example that was given tonight was P&D. A lot of those items actually come from ZBA or Plan Commission. So it's not so much the chair can do about that because it's required to be on that agenda based upon the process of how things are done for people who are applying for variances and trying to do developments. But other items may not appear on that particular agenda that meets every 2 weeks because maybe the chair says, okay, we have a lot of developments to discuss at P&D based upon what all came out of Plan Commission. So this particular item might not make it to June 14th. It might have to wait till June 28th. So yes.
And that's my point. I'm just trying to make it clear that this is a when and not an if. That's what I'm trying to make sure is clear in this rule. Right.
And it is silent, this rule is particularly silent on that, but I think that the spirit of it is that it's a when and not an if.
Yeah.
But I hear what you're saying.
And for the sake of to moving on, I'll work with you on that in between meetings, and we'll present it at the next rules meeting, because it needs to be clear, not the spirit, but it needs, for me, it needs to be in the rules. But I'll work with you on that. Thank you.
Okay. Now I have Alderman Ravel and then Alderman Reed.
I'm not sure whether this is, where this goes. I had a question for clarification about item 25, extraordinary votes.
What page? Alderman Rivera? 30.
So it's,
30, 30.
what?
Page 30.
Yeah, it's C. It says, it's this one about passage of a unique use when 30% of property owners file with the city clerk a written protest. I mean, so do we have an example of what a unique use is?
I can.
So this is not quite on point,
Okay.
but the litigation involving the pumping station in the 5th Ward, that was actually a municipal use exemption, and that code has since been amended to require notice for residents that live within 500 feet of a proposed municipal use exemption. This language in our city code is somewhat similar to that, except it's for a unique use, and I can't recall under the code what qualifies as a unique use, but our code requires notice of the potential for the council to pass a unique use. And if there are a certain number of property owners that live within 1,000 feet that file a written protest, then in order to override.
I think I can explain what a unique use is. In my time on the council, I believe we've only had one of them, and it is one level, as Ms. Gandersky said, one level higher than a special use, and the unique use that we did have on the council involved the old District 65 building that was the mansion.
Right, got it.
When District 65 sold that to move into the Joseph Hill building, there was, the purchaser wanted to divide it up, but not as we've had other large estates divided up and then developed by that developer. The purchaser wanted to divide it up and sell off the individual lots. And then on top of it, and I think this may have also been complicating it, the house, which I think is called the Dryden Mansion, is it's a landmark from the standpoint of not just the house itself, but also the prospect of the house. So the view you get from Ridge to the house is protected. So we had our zoning department drafted a unique use for this unique site that we didn't have anything else like it before, or I don't think we've had anything like it since. We may have once, but it was so that those individual lots could be sold and developed individually with some common aspect of it. And we did not have that in our zoning ordinance, and we also were concerned that we do it only one time because we weren't sure of what the potential effect would be.
Is the city code defines it as a one-of-a-kind, not listed as an authorized special or permitted use within a particular zoning district, but would be of substantial land use or economic benefit to the city.
Yes, that's it exactly. Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Now I've lost track of everybody. So I think Councilmember Fleming, and then Councilmember Kelly.
I guess I'm just trying to figure out where we are. I thought we had voted on everything we were voting on tonight, and then, Councilperson Reed brought up that he had two things for the agenda that were not on the agenda, two things for rules that were not on the agenda tonight, but they were going to be spoken about next week. So now I'm confused if we're going to just open the floor for general rules questions, or we're going to have those or for a later agenda. So it seems to me that the meeting is over, but I could be wrong.
Let me clarify. So we needed to complete the issues here in the red line, and at the last meeting, I said that we would have an interim meeting to address this, because we need to do this in order to get this aspects of our referrals and other aspects
Right.
functioning. And so the city manager and I discussed, and I think I raised it at the last meeting, that we'll have another meeting in 2 weeks.
Right. So I just was
So then
clarifying, because
the-
when Autumn Ravel brought up an entirely different rule that she wanted to discuss, which is her right to do, I thought we weren't doing that tonight. We were
Okay.
putting those additional things
Yes.
off to another night.
Sorry, so then.
Were
at that-
my 2 items from 2 months
So,
ago
yes,
still
and
stand?
I know. And at the last meeting, I said that all of those things that we didn't finish at the last meeting of June 7th, we would hold a meeting in July.
Right.
And that has now been chosen. It's July 7th.
I get
And
that.
all of the other items that were listed there will be on that.
I
agenda.
understand that. So that's why I was pointing out when Autumn Ravel started talking about an entirely different rule, why we were doing that tonight if we were not doing other business tonight.
Okay, I understand your point. Okay. So Alderman Ravel, I'm sorry I let you go on like that.
I thought that was one of the things that we'd redlined and were accepting
Yeah,
tonight.
that's what
So, I mean, it's one of those things I think it was redlined before and now showed up in tonight's thing unredlined. But
There's
we're
a motion.
accepting it. So-
There's a motion on the floor to accept all the previous changes from June 7th, and I will point out a very needed change that was discussed on June 7th that was not redlined today. It's Rule 6.2, for example, which allows for remote participation by residents. This was discussed, everybody said yes, but it never was voted on officially. So that change was made to allow for remote participation by residents. And so the motion on the floor is to accept all of the changes such like that one, as well as the ones discussed tonight in the document.
Okay, all right. So that's the motion on the floor, and it's been seconded. And I have a number of other lights on, and I don't know whether it's to discuss that or whether, okay. Mayor's is not, okay. So, no, if we could vote on that.
I want to discuss this.
I have your
particular
name.
motion. Okay.
If we could vote on this, if you have something with respect to this motion, let's move forward. Okay, yes, Councilmember Reed.
I have something with respect to this motion and separately to the referral committee. So first, I'll because I was waiting after Councilmember Burns raised issues about the referral committee. I just do want to note that, if the chair gets to choose the committee agenda schedule, and if the mayor and the city manager get to choose the council agenda, the referral committee is, as it's drafted now, is only meeting to set the disposition of an item, whether it's for introduction, action, or discussion, if the committee can't set when it appears. And so I just will leave that there. And then secondly, I would think it would make sense to, we've made these amendments and these changes. There are a few other rules amendments that are on the docket for the next meeting. I think it would make sense to incorporate all of that into one unified document and adopt it all at the same time, instead of, creating a document, putting it on the website that says whatever today's date is, the June 21st rules of the city council, and then 2 weeks later coming back and adopting another, July 7th version of the rules of the city council. It's not often that we change rules, and I think we're having a kind of a large, robust discussion about the rules here at the beginning of the term, and I just think it makes sense to adopt everything at the same time.
All right, Mayor Biss, did you have your light on? Councilmember Newsman, did you? Okay. Could you call the roll, please, on the motion?
I guess my question is, I'd like to hold the actual vote on this until the 7th. We've discussed it, and I think we can incorporate all of the changes, because we're working off a bunch of different documents. I think we should have one unified document that comes before us before we vote on this. So there's clarity about what we're adopting, as well as the other rules changes that we have for the July 7th meeting. So
Hold on. Mayor Biss?
I just want to flag that we've already changed the rules tonight. we've already made motions and passed motions that change the rules. So it is unavoidable that there will be the June 21st version of the rules, followed by perhaps the July 7th version of the rules. And so I would, especially with that in mind, recommend that we move forward.
We haven't changed the rules yet. What we've done is we've amended what is before us, but we haven't officially adopted any of it.
I don't think that's true.
There was no vote to adopt any of these rules. It was to change the document before us and then ultimately vote to. So, I mean, maybe we can get clarification.
The chair
from,
can speak to that.
I disagree. I think we've been changing the rules all night. And now what we were planning to do is then go back and officially vote on all of the changes that we made June 7th. So we've been taking votes all evening here as the Rules Committee to change our rules.
But we didn't do that on June 7th. So the motions that we were making on June 7th, tonight, we were making the same kind of motions that we were making at the last meeting, but tonight's.
That's right. We didn't, but tonight, we needed to get going on a concrete way to take each of these items and get them done. So now, this was the second half of the document, and we had consensus at the last meetings. We didn't take a formal vote, but tonight, we did take formal votes. These are the rules of the council. So, and I don't think we should delay at all. I think we should finish what we started doing, the first half of this red line on June 7th, and we should finish it tonight. And then, I mean, our ordinance changes virtually every single time the city council meets with what we approve. So people need to, anyone who's researching it needs to check on the date to see, when it was last changed. I think we should move forward tonight on this.
And Chair Nguyen, and respectfully, even to Councilmember Reed's point, from a pragmatic standpoint, like when I come back in July with the proposed changes, all of this will be clean. So the only thing that you'll have before you will be the proposed changes to 12.1, 18.11, any other rules that people submit to my office in advance of July.
After tonight.
After tonight,
Yes.
I'm going to accept all these changes. So pragmatically, it doesn't matter either way if you vote tonight or if you try to hold it. It's going to be a clean document on July 7th, with only the proposed changes that are before you on July 7th. So all the things that we've talked about June 7th, all the things we talked about tonight, those are going to get incorporated into the document.
I think we need to vote tonight to finish this work tonight. So could you call the roll, Ms.
Just point of.
Just kind of line.
Can I ask a question?
Councilmember Kelly.
So is this, just to be clear, so if we vote on this, so I see a lot of issues in there, it's like conflicting information about corporate counsel, I'm sorry, corporate authorities versus, there's some problems in the rules, so we can, voting on this, we can bring all this back at another point.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. All right.
Councilmember Kelly.
Aye.
Councilmember Braithwaite's not here. Councilmember Nguyen.
Aye.
Councilmember Nusma.
Aye.
Councilmember Burns. He's not here either. Councilmember Sufferton.
Aye.
Councilmember Ravel.
Aye.
Councilmember Reed.
No.
Councilmember Fleming. Mayor Bess.
Aye.
Councilmember Braithwaite.
Aye. Hell yeah. Sorry. Okay, let's keep moving. All right. What's next? We're good?
Sure. Okay.
So the only other item on the agenda was
We do have to make, you will change, so there will be a global change from alderperson to council member in the next set of rules. Okay. So, what else do we have?
Everybody good?
Okay, so then our next item is consideration of committee assignments based on the rules. Tonight. Yes, Mayor Biss.
I'd like to move that we appoint council members Ravel and Fleming to the Referrals Committee.
Second. All right.
Councilmember Kelly.
Aye.
I'm sorry. Okay.
What? I'm sorry, I didn't see, Councilmember Reed.
I wanted to get, if I can have 1 second, I wanted to get clarification from Councilmember Fleming on an issue.
Okay, that's fine. Has it been clarified? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, can you continue?
I would like to see a new member of the council serve on this committee as well. So I'd propose that one of the new council members also serves on this committee. Alderman Kelly, Alderman Newsom, Alderman Burns, or myself.
I think we have Mayor Biss, who is a new member of this council, serving on that committee.
Yeah, the mayor already has the authority to set the council agenda. Yes, he is a new member, but he's not a council member.
I disagree, but.
So just a point of information, are you proposing to expand the number of council members on the committee?
We've already voted on that.
We've already
voted
on that.
No, I'm just suggesting that one of the previous council members be substituted with a new member of the council.
And you or anyone else will be in 2 years, that we've already voted on, as a point of information or clarification or purpose of privilege.
All right. Ms. Ferentino, would you call the roll?
Councilmember Kelly.
Aye.
Councilmember Braithwaite.
Aye.
Councilmember Wynn.
Aye.
Councilmember Newsma.
Aye.
Councilmember Burns.
Aye.
Councilmember Sufferton.
Aye.
Councilmember Ravel.
Aye.
Councilmember Reed.
No.
Councilmember Fleming. Mayor Biss.
Aye.
All right, so now we have our referrals committee populated. Good luck to all of you. We have no new business, and I am going to, seeing no other items, I'm going to adjourn the meeting.
Oh, wait, hold on. Sorry.
I'm sorry. Okay, sorry. Alderman
Haven't talked tonight. 3.5 hours.
All right.
Two things. One, I think with Alderman Fleming's consent, she and I would replace her on planning and development now that she's on this committee. So if it's appropriate to do that here, right now, let's do it, or we could do it.
Let's make sure it's okay, because it is consideration of committee assignments. Mr. Cummings, is that okay? Is that a broad enough definition?
Yes.
All right. Okay. I move that Alderman Sufferton now become a member of P&D and in place of Alderman Fleming.
Second.
All right. Would you, Dar, would you call the roll, please?
I perfectly fine with that. I do think that as we're looking at this, we are currently in violation of one of our rules relating to this consideration of committee assignments. Our chairman is chairman of 2 standing committees, and our rules say that a member shall only be a chair of 1 standing committee. So I think as we fix this, we should also fix that. So either our current chairman is chairman of rules as well as P&D, economic development.
I don't mind doing both, but anyone want rules?
I thought.
I would love to have rules.
I thought you were chair of P&D. Okay.
I'm chair of P&D and rules right now.
So I guess my substitute motion is that we name a new chair. You just said you'd be happy to not be rules chair.
I'd rather finish this, but either one is fine with me.
Is there someone else who can do it who's not currently chair of something else?
I am happy to be chair of rules.
Everybody.
I'm sorry. I was just saying, is there someone else who can do it who's not chair of something else?
I can.
So the staff member who...
No. We have to follow our rules, which is
Understand
by
it.
seniority.
And the staff member who did the calendar is here. And so if she wants to come back with us and redo the calendar...
No, I don't.
I think we can just choose a chair and continue with the seniority order, but just since we made.
Councilmember Reed, we have a method, and Ms. Francelno is going to come back and tell us, just like she did the last time. She doesn't have to do it tonight. She's going to come back and tell us, with her careful calculations, who should be the chair of rules. Okay?
So rules is not part of that. Rules is the
Oh,
only committee.
yeah, and I.
Sorry, hold on. I want to hear Dara's explanation. I'm sorry.
Rules is the only committee, and Cummings, you can correct me, but rules is the only committee that does not count. It's just P&D, AMPW, and Human Services that you can't serve.
Rules is a standing committee.
I understand that, but it's not considered, it's not part of this whole, you can't serve those as a chair for those two.
I think that was probably because rules met infrequently. Yes.
Can someone point to a rule? I can point to the rule that says that no.
Back in, we don't have to solve this tonight.
Yeah.
I
Well,
mean,
excuse me, Alderman Braithwaite. I have the floor now. And we did. This is something we should solve now, all right? We're violating a rule. We set rules. We're currently violating it. It's something simple to swap out a council member, and also to the same point, Alderman Braithwaite serves as chair of two. We didn't appoint officially Alderman Braithwaite as chair of reparations, and reparations isn't quite a standing
No,
committee.
reparations
It's not
is
a
not a standing committee.
committee.
As I said, we didn't officially appoint Alderman Braithwaite as chair of reparations.
I think that as chair, I'm going to rule that Ms. Francelno will calculate this and come back at the July 7th Rules Committee meeting. And she'll notify whoever is the next appropriate rules chair of that issue. Although I do agree with her, rules has always been separate from that rotation.
Yes.
So, but if that's not officially in our rules, then we will figure it out. Councilmember Burns.
I think what he's saying is Alderman Braithwaite or Councilmember Braithwaite was appointed to chair the reparations subcommittee by the mayor, I believe. And if that is so, I believe the rules state that the rules committee appoint chairs to those committees, which
Correct.
we could either do that today or during the next meeting. I'm happy to vote for Councilor Braithwaite. But while we're talking about the rules, that may have been done incorrectly. So I think that's what Councilmember Reed was getting at.
Why don't we bring this back after, we're not going to decide this on the fly tonight. It will be decided after careful consideration and
Sure.
inquiry. So it will come back at the July 7th meeting. Okay? Alderman Sufferton. Councilmember Sufferton.
I will withdraw mine as well. We'll just add mine to 7th. Good with you? Or do you want, that gives you one more meeting?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
Oh, I was saying,
We already voted.
no, we didn't vote on it, did we?
No, we started to call the rule and there was discussion.
Yeah, just add it to everything else, and we'll do it all.
Right, the switch for you?
Yeah,
Yes,
which is
okay.
all agreed to and
It's all-
voluntary.
It's all tied up in a bow. It's
Yeah.
fine. Thank you.
I do have one item of new business when we get there, though, so please don't.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. All right, I can turn it off now. I asked that we add to the agenda on the 7th a discussion of scheduling the city manager evaluation, because we're going to have to get that done at some point. So I'd like to get it on the schedule. So
Okay.
if we could put that on the agenda for the 7th, that'd be great.
Yes, okay. All right. Okay, I believe we have a motion to adjourn.
Can I just, sorry.
Yes, Mayor Biss, sorry.
Yeah, I just want to flag, I'm not suggesting that we not adjourn at all, but I just want to flag that one item of unfinished business was going through the proposed changes for the rules beyond Section 9. So another thing kind of hanging over the Rules Committee's kind of to-do list is to do what we did last time. In other words, go through the rules and talk things out and give Mr. Cummings direction for how to produce a clean draft for us for the second half that we didn't get to last time.
For the second half of what?
No, we didn't. All this stuff that was in the packet 2 weeks ago that we just didn't get to because it got late, we didn't get to tonight either. So there's a bunch of kind of red line proposed changes in the last 15 or so pages of our packet that need to go to some future meeting to again be talked through. like, for instance, ironically enough, Councilmember Ravel's item is one of those items. If you scroll down to page, God help us, if you scroll down to page 149 of our agenda, it actually is flagged, Rule 25C, there's a flag, consider clarifying. That was one of the items that was initially flagged for us to talk over in this process of going through the rules. 2 weeks ago, we started that process. We got to the end of section 9. We broke.
Right.
And so now we've got sections 10 through the bottom to still do that for. I just wanted us to be aware of the fact that that's another big homework item on our list for the future.
Okay. Thank you.
Sorry.
That's fine. Let's have, if there is nothing else, could we have a vote for an adjournment?
So moved. I think the meeting's adjourned. You can.
Councilmember Kelly.
Aye.
Councilmember Braithwaite.
Aye.
Councilmember Wynn.
Yes, that's what he just said.
Councilmember Wynn.
Yes, aye.
Councilmember Newsma.
Aye.
Councilmember Burns.
Aye.
Councilmember Suffredin. Councilmember Ravel.
Aye.
Councilmember Reed.
Aye.
Councilmember Fleming. Mayor Biss.
We are adjourned. Thank you all very much.
Kelly, here.